What should we talk about? I have no idea. What's it's so funny, like I don't know what the I don't know what's I don't know what the big topic of conversation in the fandom is right now. And in some ways, maybe that's something to start with, which is like I just don't know. I don't know where the conversation's happening or what people are talking about, but
me neither.
Yeah, interesting.
Because the fandom discussions are mostly in the new ones that are either mixed canons or new canon groups, and then Star Wars EU is mainly just the same discussions that keep recurring, and some new things, but like it's just about books and stuff rather than fandoms, especially.
Is it just me, or does it feel like no one's even talking about Rise of Skywalker? It just seems like that just kind of faded away.
It did, yeah.
Really, really strangely, right? It didn't even really engender this huge, critical reaction the way that like Last Jedi had. It just seems like people are they're just done with that. But
I think after The Last Jedi, people were pretty done with all the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, it's time to put it to bed,
Yeah.
You mentioned something about the mixed canon groups, and actually that's an interesting topic of conversation at some point too. Just to really clarify for maybe someone like me what it means to just be into the EU, right? Just to really clarify for the final time that it doesn't mean I'm anti the new stuff. It's just that I like the old. So.
And like in the books, comics fanatics group and whatever, I just scroll past the posts that are about that. Although I did notice Matt Martin tweeted something funny again about basically saying that the novels aren't as canon as the TV shows, because apparently something in the Clone Wars contradicts the Ahsoka novel that they have out.
Huh.
And I'm just like, well, that's Dave Filoni not caring about continuity again, isn't it? Some things don't change.
Yeah, some things don't. Some things don't. Oh, this is interesting. Without sort of revealing my sources, even though it's not terribly sort of secretive, anyone can see for themselves who's read much of the EU. There are these occasional obvious contradictions, which then later get retconned, right? So it might be that like we have to get some sort of small insider magazine article to make sense of something that happened before that didn't make sense. Well, for the longest time, I think some of us have used some of that as like a great example of just what's so robust about the EU, that it was able to sort of find these creative retcons to make sense of things that didn't make sense before. But
the authors and stuff cared enough about it to actually do that.
They did, exactly. There were enough authors who wanted this to be the case, even if that wasn't a directive from Lucas or Lucasfilm. But the funny thing is, it's come to my attention that in the opinion of a number of the old EU authors, Leland Chee was actually, again, we give him a lot of credit for being the guy to try and kind of keep it all together. In reality,
the continuity editors.
In reality, he was the one that was actually letting a lot of these contradictions slip through, largely because he just didn't want to say no to some of these big names, right? And we know the story, right? We've heard about how Zahn refused to update the timeline to match Dark Empire at the time, things like this. And that's obviously well before Leland, but like there were a number of times where he just said, oh, that's okay, because he said, hey, great, I won't say no to the big guy. I'll just have someone write an article. I'll have Jason Fry write an article over here and sort of patch things up. So it's weird. I just think increasingly I'm just sort of losing kind of any kind of high regard I had for him as the linchpin. It turns out he was actually in some weird way part of the problem. So when we talk about Filoni being kind of just big for his britches and wanting to kind of run roughshod over the continuity, you can imagine Chee sort of feeling super intimidated, right? He's thinking, oh, well, gosh, here's this guy running this big TV show. He's friends with George Lucas. I guess I'm not going to say no. So again, it's weird. He gets credit for being a continuity cop. A very bad cop, as it turns out. So
well, at least he documented everything. Yeah. That's a big task in itself. And really, to be honest, they should have continuity historian and separate role for continuity editor or someone that keeps up with it. Because there was 2 guys in all of Lucasfilm keeping in charge of all of the continuity back then.
Yeah.
So that's not many people, is there?
Well, it's funny, right? There were that many people, and yet in the world writ large, there were thousands of fans like us who were also kind of helping keep the feet to the fire, right?
Yeah.
So we were part of that process too. But and by the way, before Cheap, there were definitely people doing it. Like Joe Bongiorno was effectively sort of the keeper of the timeline. There were these people who were just fans who were involved as a great resource. But I've got this, in a way, even though on the one hand now I kind of lost a little bit of regard for Chi, because again, I look back and he was able to have the authority to say no, but would just often say, that's fine, you're important, you do what you want to do, and I'll try and make sense of it here.
And I guess that's partly as well part of why he's really just gone quiet now.
I think that's right. I think he looks around and
he just doesn't say no to the big guy and just wants to.
He won't say no to the story group, he won't say no to the big film directors, right? Abram, whomever else, and he won't say no to Pablo or Matt Martin or whoever else on Twitter. But at the same time, I have a newfound respect for him, given this kind of timidity apparently within his desire to keep the continuity in check. When we look back at his decanonization comments about the Filoni Clone Wars, about how, don't worry guys, someday there will be the retcon to sort of make sense of it all, you can kind of appreciate where he was coming from. He just did not have it in him to say no to Filoni.
And I think there was the part where he said, well, the stuff didn't even go past my desk.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of that doesn't help either.
Yeah. Oh, well.
But I think that's the other fandom thing's just everything settling down now that the sequel trilogy's done.
But yeah, just in terms of commentary about the fandom, I'm so bored. I'm just so bored by that, right? And it's kind of like and
all I want to do is talk about the stuff. The same as you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's why I do my videos, just talking about the stuff.
Totally. And and you can't help but from time to time get sucked back into fandom conversation. And I will admit that occasionally, even if you've decided this isn't what I want to do, I don't want to talk about the fandom, well, then you've ceded the ground to people who from time to time are going to say dumb things about it, right? Or incorrect things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point where you go, well, you need to state your opinion on some things.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't get sucked into all the drama.
Especially, and this is the problem that, I've from time to time taken some things personally because I've been misrepresented. And I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, how did I now become somehow Star Wars content, right? That's ridiculous, right? How did I then become a topic of fandom conversation? I just want to share my passion for Star Wars. That's it. That's all this was about, but the landscape's changed. You really put your neck out there when you go on social media or you say something. Now you just share something and then someone's bound to sort of interpret it sort of however.
And you don't even see someone's face or real name when they're saying things about you.
That's so funny you say that, because things have changed so much. I mean, I sort of feel like, in sociology, how long is a generation? 10 to 25 years, that, right? But on social media, generations are they're 6 weeks long, right? And there's always these new waves of folks coming in, and there's already just this massive gulf between, I feel like, earlier sort of elements of the fandom, say just on social media. And the point about anonymity is interesting, because 6 years ago, when the decanonization occurred, there was such a tidal wave of hatred toward EU and EU fans, death threats, and just really bizarre, doxing and things like that, that a number of folks had to go anonymous. A number of folks had to create fake names and take their face off because they were being attacked, right? And now it's become just this commonplace thing on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and stuff, just to create an avatar and a persona and build this sort of this kind of fake brand. When in reality, again, a couple of years ago, people were doing that out of necessity, and it's kind of lost, you know what I mean? But now, those people back then were doing it for their personal sort of safety. Now you've got people who are doing it so that they can hide behind this persona and then just,
And big keyboard warriors, yay. Because we all love keyboard warriors.
Yeah. But it's so fun. I feel so stupid on YouTube. Again, I mean, I signed up for a YouTube account when it started 100 years ago. And like everyone my age, my YouTube name is just my name. I mean, how stupid. I hadn't even thought to make up,
Yeah. I couldn't think of a good name, so mine's just my name.
That's right. It's funny.
And that's the whole thing of like, for me, it's branding and stuff. Is like, if I think of a name that I really like and would want to be my brand, then sure. But otherwise, I'm going to say who I am in my videos anyway.
Yeah, and again, no judgment for people who do have fake names. It's more of a funny observation. I mean, things have just really changed. I even remember 10, 15 years ago, Facebook debates and stuff. I remember, they still got pretty vicious, but you you still kind of knew who one another were. There was kind of an equalized debate. And again, now it's really odd. There have been tons of people who have come after me who I don't know, who they don't want me to figure out, right? Like they've got a fake name, no picture. I don't know who they are. Somehow though, they know everything about me, which is really creepy, right? Because I've been stupid enough to put my name and my face up and things. And then I'm just getting like the most insane vitriol sort of spewed my way. And I'm just like, wait a minute. How did this happen? I guess I should never go online again. And geez, I regret ever becoming a Star Wars fan to boot, So things just get so hot and heavy online that it's just like, it's one of many reasons is to avoid fandom conversation as much as possible, because it can just very rarely end well,
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the stuff has just caused more issues anyway when it comes to that, as exampled by that we know.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, it's funny, everyone's to blame to some extent, right? I mean, there was a huge dust up in the fall, obviously, with different sort of personalities in the EU fandom online, and the funny thing was, there were a couple of sort of strong-willed personalities, and again, if they want to kind of clash over whatever issues they have between them, that's fine. One thing I noticed was that all of a sudden, the thing that really ratcheted it up is all of these third parties who then thought they needed to take a stand or who wanted to sort of mediate, right? So it's funny, I had some people coming after me, and look, I'm a big boy, I can stand up for myself, right? And I can sort of give it as good as I get it, right? And stuff. Yeah. But then I had people who I barely know trying to come and defend me and then attack. And then I had people on the other side, third parties from the other side coming, and it's like all of a sudden now we don't even know what we're arguing about. We just have random people sort of throwing grenades.
Yeah, devolves into just people going, what was it? At least one of the examples in Star Wars, like Melita Dan or something like that, where they just forget why they're fighting over the planet.
Right.
And so they go, well, this is stupid. They need an outside party to tell them, look, stop, this is silly.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I kind of wish, like, I think like more online debates would, I don't know that they would end any better, but at least they'd probably end faster if again, third parties just sort of let the two hash it out. They either someone wins or they just call it a draw and then it's done. Yeah. But it's all of a sudden I've been in this position a number of times where now I'm battling people again I've never met, who I don't even know have any access to whatever we're ostensibly even arguing about. And I actually think what's so dangerous about that is through that process, this is how rumors get codified into sort of, perceived facts, where it's like all of a sudden someone makes an accusation and then these third parties they just take it, on faith. And now you've completely bypassed the part at which you can even just like explain yourself. Because now it's just a battle of wits online. Horrible. Anyway, I mean, and again, I really reveal my age when I just say that, I guess I'm just too old for the internet, but it really just genuinely feels a little too toxic, to really spend much more than a couple of minutes on a month. I mean, it's
I guess either you're too old or you just need to get out of wherever those things are.
I think that's
going on the internet, because a lot of my Twitter I don't scroll because I'm friends with a couple of people on there, and so I see every bits and pieces from who they're following, and I'm like, no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of Twitter I don't scroll.
Oh, Twitter's interesting. I've noticed I've gotten in trouble on Twitter because of who I follow, right? So now I'm guilty by association. But again, I think I reveal my age when I admit that when Twitter started, the etiquette was you just follow who follows you. It's just that's what you do. But now you can't do that anymore, because now you're in trouble. And I got in trouble, for instance, last year when I they created some of these like blockchain devices that you can use to just sort of like silence people who follow other people. And I got to a point where I said, I'm going to do this because I'm just tired of seeing some of this stuff. And I did that. And then I got into trouble for some people that I unintentionally followed, right? So then I was guilty for just wanting to kind of create a quiet sort of space on my Twitter feed. You can't win, you can't win. And all the while, I'm sitting here thinking about, how do I engage on YouTube? Who do I block on Twitter? And in reality, none of this is about Star Wars EU, which is the only reason I want to do any of this, right? So it's just so far removed from the goal.
I mean, Matt's living the dream when he's going, well, I'm not going on any of that, and I'm just doing my YouTube videos.
Yeah, although, again, you see how well that works, right?
Well, yeah. If you're online in some way, shape, or form, something will happen,
Yeah.
But taking that back to the EU, it's interesting the history, thinking of 6 years ago and how things have changed. Like, how it all started with the Alliance to preserve the EU, and then it all split off because people didn't agree on things separate to the EU. And then we have all these little groups.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Yeah. Partially that, partially personalities, right? You could get into a lot of really interesting, personal history and drama there. But yeah, it kind of starts off with a kind of coordinated effort. A couple of people, like basically the day the decanonization starts, get some groups started. And then a couple, 6 years later, on the one hand, I think it's so great that there's Let 1,000 Flowers Bloom. There are so many groups and pages and YouTube channels and Twitter accounts and stuff where people can engage this stuff. But unfortunately, they spend more time arguing over who's got the better sort of strategy vision, right? So
when it comes time to unite, like say, go towards the Billboard campaign or go towards signing petitions, all of the groups are separate and one of the groups will do it. And you'll get common members between groups, but one of the groups will do it, and then it won't be enough people to make a difference because they fought over other things.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. Right. It's so funny. Every couple of months, I see someone start the new petition on change.org. Let's convince Lucasfilm to continue. I am so opposed to that as a strategy for a variety of reasons, but it's like, it's so funny. Everyone thinks this is going to be the one. We're going to get 1 billion people to sign up. And it's like, well, if you added up the 2,700 of those that have been sent around in the last year, you would get some pretty impressive numbers. But, everyone, it's just sad, all these groups, and then no one spends any time sort of thinking about the division of labor. Hey, maybe this group's better at planning this sort of a thing. Maybe this group ought to think about social media campaigns. And instead, it's just a battle of wills over who's got the best ideas.
Well, that's the thing I've talked to Jeff about when we've talked about, well, ideally there'd be the group for loving the EU, the group for criticizing the new canon, for the EU fans that want to do that, invented all that, and the group for both fans of both.
Yeah.
And then you got covering all sorts of bases where you talk about what you like in each of them.
Yeah. Instead, you've got people. And by the way, it's okay that in my opinion, it's okay that there's a bunch of groups that they're all redundant, right? So there's multiple groups that do all those things you said, but it's just, and again, maybe I'm too close to some of the history of some of these groups, but it's like, and by the way, I'm in none of them really, anymore because of a lot of this, but it's like, instead of them sort of saying, hey, cool, how great is it that we can maybe share some best insights about how we gained this follower or that, instead it's this, they only exist to sort of prove to each other who can get more followers. It's just so sad. And what's sort of destructive is it's like 6 years later, you gotta wonder, what do they actually think they're doing it for now? It seems to be the case. And by the way, it's totally they're right. It's fine, but they seem to be doing it just because now they really enjoyed the very particular sort of fan club they've created, centered around themselves and their vision. I can't tell you how disconcerting it was when Marvel 108 came out. There was one of these groups that has about 13,000 followers. Never shared anything about it. Not once. What an outrage. I mean, again, if you don't like it, don't buy it. But then again, if this was our one chance, which we've been talking about up to that point for 5 years, and you're not going to share it with 13,000 people, then that's fine, but don't pretend like you're sort of leading the charge. Just be a great space for people to talk about content, but maybe let go of the reins, quit fighting others, it's just so silly. It's so silly. And by the way, all of this stuff leads back to 2014, right? Some of these early groups, but in reality, there were groups that went back way before that, who the 2014 groups kind of dumped on and said, well, you guys aren't doing it well, we're going to do it now, right? So It goes back so long. It's so sad.
Yeah, it is. Thankfully, on my Discord server, I shut down Clone Wars discussions pretty quick by going, well, we've already discussed this. Because it keeps going in circles and circles about Clone Wars and how it fits in the EU or doesn't.
I know. And, it's a tricky balance, right? Because it's like, on the one hand, there are new people entering the fandom all the time, and that's great, right? And so there are going to be some things that they need to get caught up on. So I can appreciate some people genuinely wondering, hey, I've got a new question. But yeah, it's when it's the same people are trying to prove once again that they know more than you. You're just like, oh gosh, it just gets so tiresome and so boring, and moreover, in some of these cases too, it's like, particularly with the Clone Wars one, where it's like, there's such a simple answer. You can have your headcanon debates and you can have your preferences, but when it comes to this hugely divisive question over whether or not it's canon within the EU, guess what, guys? It is. It's that simple. Yeah. Canon. It's that straightforward, right? And it's some problems, and yes, it's worth thinking through headcanon to figure it out, but there's nothing more to argue. We knew this before 2014. It's canon. End of story, right? So
it's just mad. But I guess it's like the people that ignore the Revan book and SWTOR when they glorify Revan as well. So yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think we've talked about this before, maybe, but I do think one of the most positive outcomes of the 2014 decanonization, even 6 years on, is that the EU fandom is on the whole super united around all of the EU, and you still have folks who are more interested in this, a little more interested in that. But pre-2014, there were tons of people who just flat out said, "I do not recognize the Old Republic content." Tons of people who said, "I don't recognize, post Jedi content," whatever, right?
Or they only recognize the Bantam era.
Yes,
something like that.
Yes, exactly. And so what's kind of nice is everyone's sort of united around, hey, it's all good stuff. It's all part of this contiguous timeline that we want to know more about, and that's been positive. But I mean, I even felt that way too. I mean, I always had basically a standing order for anything EU coming out. But I'll be totally honest, since I'm not a video game guy, I was always kind of like, yeah, I'll get the Old Republic books and I'll get around to them eventually. But I wasn't super, I wasn't like, oh my God, this is so great. And now I'm like, oh my God, I need to, give me more, right? It's like, I need Drew Karpyshyn to write 27 more books, so.
Yeah, for sure. It's just that want now, because before we were always used to going, well, okay, things are coming out. We know it'll be coming out. There's no rush to collect them or anything.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, well, some things are being reprinted, not everything. So we've got to track things down and find them.
Track things down, and what I've appreciated is that for the last 6 years, every year there's always been a few things that we've sort of rediscovered, some lost things or some unpublished things. Things like that are leaking out, which has always been great. And again, of course, 108 was a huge boon. Although I was a little disappointed about the reaction, I think, to many in the fandom, because again, completely people's right not to like it, completely people's right to think that wasn't the thing that they wanted. But it was like the sort of the strange entitlement, I thought, that like people said, oh, well, I didn't want a story about Valence. I wanted X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, that's not what we got right now, but like, give it a shot, it just seemed like, again, the lack of promotion within the fandom. I mean, again, don't get me wrong, tons of people came out to support it. Tons of people bought multiple copies. It was a big success in a lot of ways, and it sold very well, but it sort of seems like it was an interesting glimpse into what would happen if the EU came back. We would find ourselves immediately in a pre-2014 situation where once again, people would be like, oh, that's EU, but it's not my EU, right? You know what I mean? All of a sudden you saw the splintering again about how, well, no, it needs to be Sword of the Jedi, or it needs to be Force Unleashed 3, or it needs to be this and that. It's like, it just is what it is. Just enjoy it for what it is. This is probably the last thing like this we'll see, maybe ever. I don't know, right? So,
yeah, the last EU comic.
Probably. I mean, realistically, I wouldn't
be surprised if it is. I I'm skeptical about the EU being continued from now anyway, at least with the current management.
I think it's worth talking about. I'm increasingly skeptical too. Again, I think in principle there's nothing stopping it, and it would make nothing but sense for it to continue for a variety of reasons. And there's nothing stopping it, except for the people who own it and the people who are in charge of it, who seem consistently obsessed with gaslighting the EU fandom about how dumb it was, how bad it was, about how poorly it sold. I mean, again, I've told people this before. I got into a conversation with Matt Martin, one of the story group members on Twitter, in the context of congratulating Matthew Rosenberg, the writer of Marvel 108, on what a great success it was and how much I enjoyed it. In the context of this thread, Matt Martin jumped on to then gaslight both of us about how, well, it really wasn't that big of a deal and it didn't really sell that well, which was a total lie. It outsold some new canon comics. And so here we go.
I think only one new canon comic was above it.
I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, this is just anecdotal, but like every comic book store I've been to in the last year, I've talked to them about it, and it sold out. It was a huge success. It was just an exciting moment for Marvel fans, comic fans, Star Wars fans, EU fans. It was a huge success. And by the way, not only did it outsell a lot of new canon comics, but historically it outsold even average runs of EU comics pre-2014, right? So somehow we've
and that was just the end of the month of release as well. I didn't see the month afters.
That's right. It's exactly right. That's exactly right. The March, I think, was it the March?
So they released it at the end of the month, so it went into those months' figures, but then most of the sales would have been after that.
That's right. And I forget what the total number was. I have it somewhere, but even with just the partial month, it was outselling pre-2014 EU comics. So again, which just goes to show we've actually added to the fandom, right? And people who were excited about this. And by the way, those numbers don't count the trade paperback that came out in February, right? Which also sold out too. So it's just such a shame, but Marvel wants to do more, and for all of this talk in the fandom about how, it's one of these things, it's one of these threats that a lot of fans sort of hold over other fans. They go, I don't like the way you talk about Star Wars or Lucasfilm. You're endangering our chances to get more like Marvel 109 or something like that. Marvel 108 came about because Marvel wanted it really bad, because Marvel loves the EU and they love that old comic storyline, and there are editors and writers who love it too. And like Matthew Rosenberg, for instance, is a huge fan of the Star Wars EU comics. The editors at Marvel are huge EU fans. They pressed and pressed and pressed and pressed. And finally, with the sort of the 80th anniversary sort of cover, Lucasfilm said, we'll do it. But it's so clear to anyone who sees that Lucasfilm, again, went out of their way not to promote it, not to push it, and again, to gaslight fans about how supposedly bad it did in the market. And it's so sad. So again, it's like the licensees, once again, they want it. Marvel wants it, Hasbro wants EU stuff, Del Rey wants EU stuff. But for some reason...
Hasbro even finagled a couple of Force Unleashed figures as well.
That's right.
And talking about this as well, it's worth noting, just saying that these are just facts of facts. You can see it evidently in things. You can go back and look at the history, and this is just how they've reacted to things.
It
rather
is.
Than we're hating on Lucasfilm or anything.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I do not support dumping on Lucasfilm. I've never liked that look. I think that it's illogical. If what you want is more EU, Lucasfilm's going to give it to us, and I want to work with them. I like Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm's a big part of my upbringing and my love of Star Wars. I want to be a partner with Lucasfilm. But again, when I see a story group member tell me and the writer of 108 that it didn't do that well and wasn't that big of a deal, and lie about how much promotion they put into it, what am I to conclude except that Lucasfilm just doesn't care about me anymore? Because I guess I'm old, or I'm just part of a different fandom or something. And so
you're not part of the new relevant material they want to push.
That's right. And so this nonsense about how the fandom has to be careful and be nice to Lucasfilm, otherwise they're not going to give us good things, is ridiculous. Like, everybody involved with Star Wars wants to give us more EU, except for the people who own it. And I just think at this point they're just too stuck in they've got too many eggs in this new canon basket. Again, totally their prerogative, totally their right. But I just think, frankly, at this point, I'm done trying to convince them that we're here. They know we're here. They know we're here to the point that they want to try and kind of like lie to us about how we're not that big of a force. But I'm just once again back in all I want to do is I want to just keep reading and rereading the EU. Occasionally defend it from some trolls that come at us from the new canon side, but I said this. I did videos back in like 2015 about this, and I'll reiterate it today. I think the best thing anyone could do for the EU is just love the EU, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Just enjoy it. That's yeah.
I think that's one of the things at the core of my video I did for the anniversary is just making sure because you're saying you're an EU fan and you love it. Read it, enjoy it, and then you actually can hold conversations about the content rather than talking about bashing on Lucasfilm or even just all the time it's like asking for more EU. Instead of doing that, like on the May the 4th Disney Plus post or whatever that people went. I only saw it because I muted it because I didn't want to see the ads for new canon, but
yeah.
I saw it through someone else, Brian Borgs, shared about it, and I was just like, well, okay, you can promote me if you want. I'm going to talk about EU. I don't have to ask for more legends or EU, but I can just say one of my most favourite moments was Jedi Academy Trilogy, which were my first EU books, and playing Battlefront 2 and Force Unleashed on PS2.
Mm-hmm.
It's as easy as that, just loving the EU and talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they wouldn't want to promote that, though. They want to talk about people's favourite moments from the new canon.
Sure. And understandably, right? Understandably, so.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think too that just as a theory of social change, it's just true that you don't have to go around and we talked about this the last time you and I did a video. You don't have to go around pretending to be positive. If Matt Martin says something stupid to you, it's okay to say that's stupid because facts are facts, like you said, right? But I also feel like but my interaction with him probably didn't turn anyone on to the EU, right? If anything, it probably turned people off and just said, this is just bizarre. What I think turns people onto the fandom is if they see, for instance, you doing a video about how much you love Jedi Academy. So sure. if you're enjoying it and you're exuding that enjoyment, people are gonna say that sounds like a book series that would be fun for me to read too, and that's how we're going to actually get more people interested in this, So
yeah, I turned it right up for the Lost in Time crossover between the Droids and Ewoks comics.
Oh yeah. Yep.
That was good fun.
Yeah.
Making the videos is half the fun as well on my side because I get to talk about it, and that's fun too.
Yeah.
And thinking back on 108 as well with my review of it, which came later, I understand that some people might want to be saying about, I know Matt said he wanted to talk to me or whatever at one point, and he never got around to working out a time to. But 108, and when my review came up, it was like, well, okay, I can understand wanting to be positive about it, definitely around the time of its release to try and get more EU. But at the same time as well, when you're asking for more EU, you want to also ask for more quality out of it as well, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I remember you and I talked about your review too, and I was a little surprised. You were a little critical of some elements of it, but again, that's totally fine. And what I appreciated with that, you took the time to read it and then offered a review. There were folks who, before it was even published in the fandom, were like, "Oh, this is going to be crap. Disney's going to be, thinking Disney writes comic books, or Disney's going to ruin it or whatever." It's like, no, let's wait and see, right? And again, I can appreciate where you're coming from and some of your critiques of the story. I thought it was great. I actually really, really liked it. But
don't get me wrong, I still really quite enjoyed the story and reading it.
Yeah, and
the new story. So.
What was so clear for anyone who genuinely believed is I've never been super concerned. I've never been super concerned about the supposed SJW sort of thing or whatever.
I don't care as long as the story's good.
I don't care either. And again, that's the thing. Not only was none of that stuff in there, right? For anyone who thought, oh no, any new EU is going to be ruined by evil SJW stuff. Again, I've never cared about that critique, the SJW critique. But
they even put some minority stuff like that in some of the EU. It just wasn't the main focus of the story, and it was written well. And
yeah, exactly.
So you can enjoy the story, and if you're looking for that, you see it.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't understand people get all worked up about that. But But
Me neither.
but wasn't
I don't care about politics as much either, so I don't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think the other thing too, though, is, and I made a video about this at the time, and I wasn't being facetious. I genuinely thought, even if the story sucks, it's worth supporting. Maybe you don't. Maybe that doesn't mean you go out and buy it, but maybe you just remind people, hey, this is what we've been talking about for 5 years. We want new EU, and oh my gosh, they actually gave it a green light. So this is just, at the minimum, let's just admit that as a fandom, we're kind of winning right now, right? This is a success, and I feel like this is just one of the most challenging things about really any kind of fandom that becomes a movement. Whether you're talking about politics or pop culture or society, there comes a point when it becomes so entrenched and so insular, and it forgets to sort of recognize progress when it's being made, right? And like you said, look in the last year, Marvel 108, multiple new figures, right, from like Legends lines, right? Increasing number of people joining the fandom. Like, there are successes, and it's okay to admit that. You know, it's okay to both be mad that we don't have more EU, but admit that there's a couple of good things happening at the same time, right? And it's just
I've still been getting SWTOR expansions.
Absolutely.
I know you're not a gamer as much. That's still something.
It's huge. And actually, you know, in the same way that, like I was saying, pre-2014, there were still these little tribes within the EU fandom. You know, not everyone was a SWTOR fan, and not all SWTOR fans were EU fans, really writ large, right?
Well, not everyone's a gamer like you.
Exactly, right? And yet the amazing thing is, like, last year at Celebration, you know, I talked with all of the official sort of, you know, SWTOR groups and everything. And what's so cool is, for the first time, they now recognize how they're basically carrying the torch, right? They now appreciate that in addition to getting new expansions of the game they love, they're helping to sort of keep the entire fandom going too. And it's really neat to see the way that they've been brought into this, and they really appreciate that role. And by the way, for a brief period of time, the Save the Clone Wars community was doing sort of the same thing, right? Which is another reason why I thought it was so kind of unfortunate that there's always been this anti-Filoni Clone Wars thing, to the extent that part of it is part of the EU, because it's like, that was a huge constituency that in some sense we lost by saying, get out of here, we don't want you anyway, you know?
Yeah, by saying, well, yeah, a lot of people saying, well, that just goes in new canon, and we don't want any more EU part of that.
Right.
Which is all gatekeeping as well. So.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? You know, I just think like, I've said this before too. I just wish at the end of every sentence someone would just say, in my opinion, right? That's all, you know? It's okay to keep multiple sets of books, right? Like, it's okay to say, I recognize that the Clone Wars is T-canon, and that creates problems for the continuity, and so someday I hope they figure it out. While on the other hand saying, I don't like the Filoni Clone Wars. You can hold both of those positions, you know? You know.
And if you're completely getting rid of it, then you get rid of Fate of the Jedi, and you get rid of Kenobi, you get rid of Plagueis, you get rid of anything that came out afterwards with Connection Sword, because you can't reconcile it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it turns out to actually, and again, in a couple of, you know, it's so funny. I think the conventional thinking among a lot of folks in the fandom is that, oh, it's just an entirely awful show, and that, you know, that's not fair. I mean, there's some really good episodes, and there's some things that are really fun about it, and there's some things that make some really cool contributions to the EU, and there's some that are silly and stupid, and that's fine, right? It's like, it's okay.
It's a show after all. You got to have some parts.
Yeah, that's right. You know, but there's certainly some more serious shows too that I think are still appealing to. But anyway, it's just the Clone Wars things, man. It's just it's so amazing how we still can't get past that. It's like,
yeah, no.
But again, but I will admit that it's a huge problem that Lucasfilm. It's maybe the thing that bugs me the most about the decanonization. It's that they left that problem there, right? They promised.
Yeah, yeah. The worst thing in retrospect is that transition period was not. There wasn't really a transition period. They just completely went done.
That's right. And again, that's what's so funny. When you think about it in that perspective, reframe it that way. it's a total waste of energy to critique Filoni. The problem is Lucasfilm, who ended it abruptly. And, again, I actually feel bad for Filoni. Folks need to realize his show was canceled. It was canceled before the decanonization. He had been producing the last season. He didn't know. He wasn't in on these plans. So imagine the day he wakes up and says, yeah, the show's done. Well, geez, talk about abrupt, right?
And also, it's the same thing as people blaming people in new management, Lucasfilm, as I call it. Is that Lucasfilm hired the people and approved what they wanted to approve. And so they would, because the management was better back then, they would have smoothed it over because they wanted to do that for the continuity.
Yeah.
And then the new management came in.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah.
Man.
That happened.
Yep. This is so random, but I just wanted to mention this. I can't remember, did we already talk about this? Because we spent a few minutes before we turned the record button on, but just talking about sort of like what it means to like both canons.
Yeah, I forget if you mentioned it while recording, so it's worth mentioning.
I'll just say, partially just for as a personal sort of appeal, but also just as a general topic of conversation. It's funny, I've been accused of being an quote unquote EU purist because I don't follow the new stuff. And they call me an EU purist because they think it has some pejorative connotations. In reality, it's a term that like Joe Bongiorno, who runs StarWarsTimeline.net, uses simply to describe people who are just interested in the old continuity, right? And who want more.
Yeah.
But there are...
And I think it's a connection to like OT purists as well.
Yeah, right. But like there are tons of people who paradoxically enough can be an EU purist, but also a fan of the new canon. Because again, being an EU purist just means you just don't like the mixed canons. That's it, right? But you might enjoy both. But it just seems like there's just such confusion over what it is that I think the majority of EU fans are arguing for. And it's a shame because it seems like I thought we did a pretty clear job of this back in 2014, right? When they decanonized, we said, well, that's fine. Decanonize all you want, just don't discontinue the old, right? Just keep more of it going. So again, decanonization doesn't bother me. I want new stories and set in the old in the universe. And so, there's been kind of this like threat again, sort of leveled at a lot of folks in the fandom where it's kind of like, well, unless you like both and unless you promote both, then you're harming the chances for more EU, because after all, Lucasfilm is just going to view you as like a naughty little person or something if you don't like both. And no, the whole point is like both if you want to, or just like one or the other. And that's okay too, right? And one of the reasons why, just personally, I have spent so much time trying to develop some resources and places and Facebook groups and websites and stuff that are just focused on the EU is not because I don't follow the other stuff. It's just because literally every pop culture site in the world is focused on the new canon stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed for YouTube channels as well. They try and do both, but then all of the stuff is coming up for the new canon, and that's what's topical, and that's what they want to cover, and so they go over to all the new canon stuff and don't cover EU anymore.
Yeah.
But I was finding, like, I can't find a good EU channel other than Matt doing his Expanded Universe reviews, pretty much, that I actually enjoy watching, and I'm going, well, okay, what can I do? And so that's part of the reason I started my channel as well, is like, so people can actually watch a channel that is just EU and this is talking about and enjoying it.
Yeah, and again, like, and by the way, there's tons of channels like Geeks Attic is a channel that does reviews of both, and actually I enjoy that because I like his perspective in general. So I like to hear a little bit more about what he thinks of the new canon, even though I don't follow it. And again, so those channels are great too, but it's just like, but this idea that unless you're doing both, you're somehow harming the fandom or harming the cause is so absurd. It's like, no, like by definition, because I'm just following the new doesn't mean that I have to have an opinion about the or the old doesn't mean I have to have an opinion about the new. My whole thing is I follow the old stuff, but by all means let the new stuff continue too. We want both. I don't have to follow both. I don't even have to promote both. But again,
it's not like there was a lot of the vocal minorities around the time of the decanonization. They were saying, oh, even now they'd say trash the new canon and just have EU, which isn't the right way to go about public statements anyway about that. But the way my argument's like, well, I bought the Battle Angel Alita manga and I bought Firefly comics and novels now. And I'm like, that's money. That's at least $300, $400 that would have gone to EU if it was still coming out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's been great. I mean, since 2014, I mean, I've discovered whole new shows and series and stuff. And it's actually really great. I mean, I've just been diving back into comics in a big way. I mean, I was always a big comic book fan, but like in the last couple of years, there really hasn't been much in the way of Star Wars comics to buy. So great, I'm getting caught up on everything else. And so again, that's money that was reserved for Lucasfilm, and I would gladly give them more of it if they gave me more opportunities. But again, in theory, from their point of view, they'd say, well, why don't you come and see the new movies? No, because I just don't want to. Doesn't mean I don't support two canons. I just want more of the old, you know what I mean? So, but again,
I've definitely tried to give them the opportunity and everything with each of their movies. I've been a bit more like, okay, there's an opportunity to be able to do some good stuff, but then now I'm just like, I don't have any passion for it. Just don't care.
Yeah, it's funny, and some folks would say, see, Callum, you're doing the right thing. You gave it a chance, and therefore you're the reason why we're going to get more EU because you followed both or something. And someone would say, see, Chris,
if anything, I get the people that say, well, you gave money to Disney.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. You can't win. You can't win. I remember, and again, I'll just admit I'm a little more stubborn or something, but I remember before the decanonization, I had already decided not to follow the new stuff. And some folks may be saying, wait, how is that? What new stuff? This is
the stuff released
for a couple of, yeah, and I by the way, I was actually at the time I was pro Disney buying it. I thought that was going to be a good thing. And we actually got a lot of great content between 2012 and 2014 after Disney bought it. Yeah. So I didn't think there was any problem. But I
don't think the problem's really Disney. It's more the people that are in charge of Lucasfilm, because it's when the management changed over that it caused all of the decanonization and everything else.
Yeah. It's an interesting side conversation. I think I don't think it has anything to do with Disney. I think it's Kathleen Kennedy. I'm speculating here, but I think it's Kathleen Kennedy who just didn't know better, and I think was listening to Pablo Hidalgo and a few other folks inside Lucasfilm who just had different opinions about where the continuity should go. And then I think on top of that, I think J.J. Abrams had no interest in connecting to the old stuff and said, no, I'm a filmmaker, not a Star Wars guy, so what I want to do is do this. I think that combo is what sort of created the decanonization. But for a couple of years pre-2014, it's important to remember there'd been talk about how there was going to be some sort of reorientation around what the new continuity was. And so we all knew pre-2014 that some decanonization was happening. No one anticipated the wholesale throwing out. But I remember there was starting to leak in 2014 that the new movies were not going to be set in the EU continuity. And it was at that point that I just said, well, that's the only reason I'm a Star Wars fan. And so I guess I'm not going to see those movies. And so, again, it has nothing to do with I don't care about Disney's politics. I don't care about, I have no opinions about Kathleen Kennedy. I blah, 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 blah. I just realized it's just not going to be the thing I liked. It was just that simple, So again, for people who like it.
It's interesting you had the foresight to think of it like that, because I was a bit younger, of course, when it happened. I was going, okay, cool, they have a new timeline. They could do this, and this with it. They could have, not specific ones like some people say, oh, you had too high expectations, but I guess I've been spoiled by the EU. I was like, the EU progressed in a great way. Okay, this is a different timeline. Things can play out differently. But if we have a great story again, that's a different one, I would have still enjoyed it more.
It's a good point. And in all fairness, I actually did, for a brief period of time in 2015, I actually did test out a few of the when they started putting out comics in the new timeline.
Oh, yeah.
I read the Chewbacca miniseries. There was a Lando miniseries. I read a couple of the Shattered Empire, which were sort of like a prequel to Force Awakens.
Okay.
And just because, look, I'm at the comic shop anyway, let me pick this up, and I will admit it was emotionally difficult to detach from the name Star Wars, right? Even if I decided I didn't care about these films. They're comics, let me read them from that medium's perspective. And I just remember, I read Tarkin, by the way, too, because I got it as a gift. I'll read it. But
and that's sort of, a lot of people say, well, at least a few people I know say that, Tarkin is sort of worth reading because it connects more to the EU anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously in that way. I love James Luceno. It doesn't fit. There's contradictions, but it's fine. But in any event, the thing that struck me so vividly about like the Lando miniseries was I was like, wait a minute. They just threw out 37 years of continuity just so they could tell this, frankly, fairly boring story that doesn't advance the lore of the new canon. It was just another adventure.
Yeah. So that was something I noticed with the Darth Vader's Psycho Girlfriend comic or whatever that I saw. They have all of this stuff that they could be telling meaningful stories that builds the new lore and everything, and then they choose to do that.
Yeah. There was just no plan. Right? And so, again, like they might have had a chance to really grab me. If one of those first comics was like, this is the new restatement of what we want to do, and it wasn't. It was just like, it was, on the one hand, it was just kind of boring, kind of more of the same, but like still could have fit in the EU. And so it kind of added insult to injury, right? It's like, wow, this could have been just sort of like a boring EU story, but instead, this is what you're leading with the new stuff. And again, I'm not trying to knock the new canon. It was just, that was my one chance, and they totally lost me.
Yeah, they lost me on reading the novels because I read the advertised one saying this is a must-read lead into the next movie.
Oh, sure.
Called Aftermath by Chuck Wendig. And so I read that and went, oh, that's not that good. And I read The Force Awakens novelization. I'm like, yeah, okay, it expands upon the same things, but I still don't care too much for the story. And then I'm just like, I'll let the movies try and impress me for the rest of the sequel trilogy. Because I started it, I'll finish it, and then done. I watched season 7, episode 1 of the Clone Wars, and then went, I just don't care.
Yeah, isn't that sad? I kind of wish that I wish I'd like downloaded the original kind of like half-produced versions they had on the site for a while, because but I have no interest in the new.
I think you should be able to find them on YouTube.
Is that right? I just have no interest in the new season. Poor Chuck Wendig. I mean, they just completely set their guy up for failure. I mean, so consciously trying to sort of kind of recapture that spirit of the Thrawn trilogy, right? Of course it had to be a trilogy. It had to be the big thing, this is what happens after, they really, really, I think, just blew that from a marketing perspective,
Yeah. False advertising is when people read it, they go, well, that's not what they promised.
Something's really weird, at Del Rey, where it's like, by the way, the editors at Del Rey love the EU and want more EU and know that the EU fandom exists, and they know.
I think pretty much everyone does, except for Lucasfilm.
Well, that's right. Everyone. I mean, and that's the interesting thing. Everyone right now, every licensee, right, whose bread and butter is like, trying to use these Star Wars licenses to make money, to tell the story, to kind of continue to unfold. They all are like begging Lucasfilm, but Lucasfilm just says no. It's just unfortunate. And by the way, I think that you have to think that all the Corona stuff is going to make it even harder for them to make the case, right? When Marvel says to Lucasfilm, we really want to do 109 because 108 sold like gangbusters.
What side of your comics now?
Well, Marvel furloughed all of its writers. I mean, so there's not even a comic book industry right now, So
and going either digital or not producing comics at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just a bad time for pop culture. But
thinking of bad times is a bad time for the billboard as well, because I know they couldn't. I guess they would have tried to talk to the people who try and change the contract, but then they couldn't, and so.
Well,
that happened.
It had been moved. It had been moved months before to to April, and it was locked in. I mean, these things don't go up overnight. I mean, I think planning for that started like well over a year and a half ago, and so it's funny. It's a shame. I mean, people were critiquing it because they're like, "Oh, this was bad timing." Well, yeah, of course.
And no one foresaw all this.
Yeah, who foresaw the entire planet shutting down? I mean, the first time in history that people who aren't sick are being quarantined. I mean, this is insane, right? But yeah, but at the same time too, and by the way, I was involved in that effort. I helped them in a couple different ways.
I put my money towards it, and honestly, it was like, well, I'll put money towards this, and then if no more EU comes out of it, I'm gonna just save my money for other things.
Well, I think that I in principle, I love the idea that every couple of years we get to tell Lucasfilm, hey, I just spent money on something to tell you that I want to spend money on something, right? And I think there's something fun about that message. But what I do think that, well, two things really quickly. Everyone was concerned about the timing and everything. What people forget, I think, is that for 5 years, the EU fandom had one goal, and it was to wait it out. It out. We had been told at the very beginning in 2014 that, well, there may someday be new EU, but we want to kind of give the new films a chance, right?
Yeah,
which was great.
Let that sequel trilogy run their course.
Yeah, and that makes total sense, right? None of us, and that's what was so impressive about 108 is that it effectively came out earlier than we thought, right? So the only thing any of us had to do was just wait. And so one of the reasons why the billboard went up when it did, i.e. post episode 9, is that we wanted to remind them, right? That, hey, you sort of hinted that after 2019 there'd be something, just so you know we haven't gone away. And that was it, right? So to that extent, the timing is perfect. But I think that, I don't think there ever will be another billboard, unless someone else wants to do it, by the way, which anyone should. I mean, it's not, Brian and Dylan and the folks at TSF are such hard workers, and it's amazing what they did. I'm not trying to knock it. But then again, if someone wants to go do the work, they can try it themselves. But I don't think there'll be another billboard, partially because I think we've learned enough about Lucasfilm to know that although Lucasfilm, by the way, they recognize Twin Suns, they invite them to events, they know that Twin Suns are honest dealers and good people and stuff, and they do good things for charity. So Twin Suns and a lot of the EU has a really good working relationship with Lucasfilm. It's just the content people who gaslight us on Twitter. What I think we need to do is not remind Lucasfilm, but we need to keep reminding Marvel and Hasbro and Del Rey to keep asking Lucasfilm. So we've now kind of hit a dead wall with Lucasfilm directly. We need to go to the licensees, the people who are the ones that are actually creating the content. I think that needs to be sort of like the new strategy. If there was ever to be anything like that, put a billboard outside of Marvel. I mean, honestly, right? But
and keep doing what we've been doing pretty much on social media, is just maybe even make sure we try and do more, like saying, we wouldn't want to spam them, of course, because that just gets annoying, but keep reminding them, look, hey, we're still here, we still love more of you.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I don't know if folks remember this, but about 12 years ago, there was a show on CBS called Jericho, like a primetime drama.
I'm not familiar with it.
It's very good, and it's very relevant, by the way, to our current times, because it's about kind of like a post-disaster, the little town in the Midwest in America. There's like a nuclear war, and then it's kind of like a Walking Dead minus the zombies. Very good show. It lasted maybe 2-3 seasons, and it was a real cult hit. And when it went off the air, there was a movement that emerged to get it back, right? And it hasn't died 12 years later. And here's the interesting thing. I'm sort of involved in a minor way in this sort of fandom to kind of keep it going, which was kind of where I learned some things about the EU movement, right? Like how to kind of...
You learned some things before it sort of started becoming more the EU trying to get continued.
That's right. And one of the most interesting things was, in a couple of cases, it was as simple as telling the show writers that we were out there, and they said, that's really good to know. And you know what they did? They produced 2 graphic novels with IDW, continuing the storyline. And now there's talk about them maybe doing a 5th one. Why? Because we wrote to them and said, hey, Not to be opportunistic, but Jericho seems highly relevant to our current times. We think a season 5 graphic novel would be really worthwhile. And now there's some clues as of this morning that they may do that. So every once in a while, it's just about being in the right place at the right time. And like you say, just remind them, tell them, we still love this stuff and we'd still want more.
I definitely think that's relevant to would be Firefly as well, because everyone wanted the season 2 of Firefly. And now we've got comics and novels to be able to continue the story.
Totally.
And especially the ones that were released by Dark Horse, you could definitely see season 2 of Firefly in those.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible, right? This stuff's possible. Again, the biggest bulwark right now is just that Lucasfilm is just being really stubborn, and so, again, totally their right, totally their prerogative. But, can I just, by the way, again, just to make totally clear, I do not represent the Twin Suns Foundation.
Yeah.
There's just one persistent myth that I just want to clear up on their behalf, which is that the sort of the group of people that came together to sort of fund it was so small that it wasn't going to send in and of itself much of a message, right? And I just have to clear this up. What people don't understand about the way that charities in the United States are organized, and they're designated by the Internal Revenue Service with a particular philanthropic status, right? They're 501c3s. They're community education-based organizations. This is very technical, but they have to spend what they get, right? And there's certain caps too on what they have to report, at the end of the year for taxes. A lot of very complicated detail minutia. There was a point where they literally couldn't accept any more funds before it meant they had to do a series of other sort of really annoying bureaucratic things, right? In other words, all they needed was to just fund the billboard at a certain amount, after which they actually cut it off. So there were tons of people who wanted to contribute, but were just too late because it funded so fast. But again, there's been a myth that
it's amazing how quickly it funded.
Crazy, well over half the time it took to do the first one years ago. So again, just to clear up this myth that there was only X number of people who contributed. There was only so many that could in the first place, right? The point is that it got funded, right? So I had to clear that.
X is an unknown quantity. It would be however many people.
Exactly.
So, it wouldn't be the 80,000 or 200,000 that Pablo Hidalgo said, we might consider it if we get that many people flapping their wallets at it.
Yeah. It's interesting, by the way. I've seen for years, there've been folks who have tried to critique the EU fandom. What they'll do is they'll look for proxies online. They'll say, well, if you add up all of these different Facebook pages, there's really only X number of people who are EU fans anymore, and so it's not really a force, And on the one hand, I have to remind them that every Star Wars fan is an EU fan to some extent, right? If all you did was one time play Episode 1 Racer in an arcade and liked it, you're an EU fan, right? That's all it takes, right? So every one of us is an EU fan, but moreover, by the way, don't just look at Facebook groups or YouTube groups.
Yeah, don't just look at social media even. I know people that are just going, well, I don't want to bother to try and stay in the fandom because of all this stuff that went on, but they still enjoy the EU.
Totally, right? But the interesting thing was I was looking at some figures that I have from the late 90s about the number of people in the Lucasfilm fan club, and they're objectively they're really kind of low numbers, but that was apparently enough to convince Lucas himself to do 3 new prequels and to kind of keep. So it's one of those things we got to kind of keep it in perspective, right? It's so funny. Everyone is just so desperate to find reasons to sort of discount.
And even the people not in the official fan club that bought all the books and the comics, that enjoyed the stories.
Yeah.
They're the main ones. The ones that won't bother about trying to join any fandom thing on Facebook or anything.
Yeah.
They just buy the stories and read them. And I know if New EU came out, a lot of the people that are reading new canon novels and comics would read those as well. And that seems to be the general thing of it.
Yeah. Man, 108, 109. Hopefully, who knows? Who knows? We'll see 109. I doubt it, but I was happy with 108. We'll see.
108, 109. I mean, I think that the original Marvel runs wrapped up pretty well. Maybe if they did something in one of the other gaps in the EU, would be better.
Yeah, that would be fun, and I wish there was, I wish there was less arguments about what that next thing needs to be, and instead more sort of fun conversations about what are some of the gaps, right? And I think that's a fun thing to kind of talk through. What are some of the obvious, major, hanging threads? I think the biggest one, in my view, is there's probably two really biggies that I'd love to see: Force Unleashed 3 as like a book or a comic or something, and then something bridging the gap between Crucible and Legacy. I mean, without a doubt, that needs to be.
I think the big gaps themselves in the timeline would be Crucible and Legacy, and probably between the Old Republic and the Darth Bane books. It's sort of like SWTOR, Knight Errant, sort of in the middle of the one shot, and then the Bane books definitely have a lot of space around them to be able to tell good stories.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the last thing I'd want is something that makes sense of the Clone Wars, and I'd be happy. Again, I feel like we talked about this last time we did a video, but I feel like there's a couple of easy ways for them to knock this out, even if it's just a couple of short stories. But again, every time I get gaslighted by someone from the story group on Twitter, it kind of lowers my expectations to the point that if all Lucasfilm did was just reissue their decanonization message, but just like make more sense, then I'd be happy, right? Give me some true, like you said, give me a transition, give me a reason, right? Rather than just, we woke up one morning. And by the way, the interesting thing is I think they decanonized when they did, like literally on April 25th, 2014. I think they did it that day because a couple of days before, I sort of alluded to some leaks that were coming out about the films and stuff like that. It had been leaked that it was pretty much known by around April 23rd, it was pretty much known that the new movies now were not going to be EU, right? And I think that they scrambled, and I think they released that announcement earlier than they wanted to, just to kind of cover up the bad news.
And they definitely would have announced it earlier, because a bit later if they could, because they still had Son of Dathomir, and there's a bunch of short stories that are still technically EU that came out afterwards.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff, and it's one of those things.
And that's just within the later half of 2014. I was thinking of.
There's Legacy. The second volume of Legacy went all the way through August. Son of Dathomir. Obviously the SWTOR stuff. There's even, and this is so funny. There's even as late as 2016. There's a reference guide called Star Wars Graphics, published by Egmont in the UK, that is entirely EU. So go figure, right? In fact, it's funny. There's a funny story. If you go on the Wikipedia article about it, there's a quote from Pablo. Someone asked him about it on Twitter. Even he didn't know about it. But it just kind of goes to show kind of how kind of messy some of the licensing was, right? So
it seems to happen with them a bit, because what was it, the Hungarian Han Solo books I didn't know about before either.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that was a weird deal where it was kind of confusing, and they're like kind of quasi licensed, right? At least the first couple. So there's a lot of that confusing stuff, and the RPG mags that have EU stories, right, from the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And that's very controversial because, Leland came along and just said, well, it's all S canon, but only because he just was missing the paperwork. But all that stuff was either licensed or sort of sub-licensed, right, from West End Games and stuff. So
that's where I go. S canon isn't really much different. It just means that some details might not line up as much.
Well, that's partially, although nothing, right? It more often than not that they're too late.
But it's like Luke having his lightsaber after Empire Strikes Back. That sort of thing is like, okay.
Yeah.
I
don't like S canon. I think it's way too broad. But
if they'd actually taken the time to go through it a lot more, would have made more sense.
And they did a lot of it. A lot of it has been elevated and stuff, right? But And it's interesting too, by the way, if the EU had continued to go post 2014, what would have become of T-Canon, right? It would have been interesting to sort of see. There might have been some point at which they get rid of it again and refold things back in, right? Or, it's just, again, the problem isn't T-Canon. The problem is that Lucasfilm ended any future for evolution, right? So
yeah, because it might have even had to be. Yeah, I probably would have had to be cut back because there'd be too many layers then. If they just kept adding canon tiers, because they go, well, this doesn't quite fit. Let's add another canon tier.
It's not clear, but it seems like the interesting thing too is, again, a lot of people look at T-Canon and they just think that's the Filoni canon, so they don't like it because they don't like Filoni, right? And it's understandable, right? But they equate it with Filoni. But there were more TV shows in the works, and those were going
to have the Underworld TV show and Detours.
Those were going to be T-Canon. Now Detours was going to be its own canon tier.
And canon that was going to come
out. But what's interesting is that now that would have created problems. Then people would have said, well, wait a minute, why aren't the Droids and Ewoks cartoon shows T-Canon too? People,
No, people were already saying, like, why isn't the micro series T-Canon?
Right.
The Clone Wars micro series.
And the interesting thing about that is there are a couple of elements of that. There's elements of that show which are S-canon because they contradict. And by the way, this is like the thing I'm always obsessive about. I always come back to this. The fundamental problem when talking about canon tiers is that it's not as if one product is always just on one tier. It's every element is designated. So
the way that Leland Cheat organised it, was that he would organise it by the certain characters and the certain things inside of it, not the actual material itself.
That's right. So when people say,
I know I put designations on my timeline for stuff, which I thought was a good thing to do something different from my timeline as well.
Well,
but
and no, it's. I mean, the nice thing is it's generally the case that like an entire book is in one tier, right? But from time to time, where there are those things that don't add up, it just means that thing is just that one piece is just elevated, and that's okay because then over time it can get re-elevated. And by the way, that's exactly how, in some sense, over time, things could have been dealt with in the Filoni Clone Wars. If there were things that didn't make sense, they could have been individually de-elevated to S, right? So
or even some of the stuff like Mandalore, they created a retcon for, and stuff like that. Even though people may not like it, they were starting to smooth it over, and then they stopped because all that.
Yep. I hope one day I can go back and just find the patience to just re-watch all the old Clone Wars, just with just kind of a fresh perspective and take it for what it is,
I need to re-watch it as well sometime because it's been a while. And I mean, it's never been a big thing for me. I watched it once. I've watched some of it twice because I started doing the thing with Evan, and then that ended up getting tricky because of time zones. But
yeah, no kidding. I've said it before, but I watched it when it first started, didn't like it, and kind of regret not watching it at the time because, again, who knew that a couple years later we wouldn't have anything, right? But just wasn't for me. But I remember being really excited when I went to the first celebration I went to after it had started. I started noticing how many young kids were really into it. And I thought, cool, great. This is how the next generation is getting hooked on Star Wars. Fantastic. They like Ahsoka, so I can then teach them about, everything else in the EU. Fine, if that's the hook, that's fine. But gosh, isn't it crazy how if you didn't know better, you would think that the entire Star Wars saga is about Ahsoka. She's the new hope. It's so insane. And I've for a long time I've started to think, by the way, I'm slightly changing topics, but it got me thinking here. I've started to think that publication order is the best order to read the EU in. I'm starting to come around to that view again. Not sort of like chronological, the publication order.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
There's some value, there's some problems, right? But I tend to think that's the best way of doing it, precisely so that
you get to read along as the EU evolved when it came out.
Yeah, you get to appreciate the retcons when they come, because now you know why. When you get to Death Star, you know why. That's
and
needed,
you definitely have a great way of keeping track of, okay, this was a new thing that added in the EU, rather than me going, oh, that mentions someone, let's look it up and make sure that's a first appearance or whatever.
I think, though, I do think, though, that the Filoni Clone Wars is maybe the greatest argument against doing that, though, because, and here's why, because I sort of feel like, again, if you were to watch it all in chronological order, or read and watch all the EU, all of a sudden you'd be like, well, yeah, who is this Ahsoka person, and why isn't she mentioned in the Revenge of the Sith? And that type of thing, right? Why,
And you'd read all of the other Clone Wars multimedia project before 2008 Clone Wars as well.
Oh, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think that in some ways it's like, creatively, in Filoni's mind, this is just where the story and the characters need to go. In his mind, having spent all these years, he just thinks, in his view, Ahsoka's the most interesting, so she needs to get more attention, which only in kind of a publication sort of order can you appreciate, right? Where you kind of like, you look back and you go, yeah, there's 40 years of stuff. I get that. We've been there. We've done that. I want to go someplace new. So creatively, I get where he wants to go. But again, if you looked back at it, if you looked at chronologically, someone would be there to say, well, this doesn't make any sense. But then again, it's like, just as the content's evolving, someone's like, no, I think this is a neat narrative, new direction. That's the one downside to the publication order, right? So, and I feel like that would be the one downside too, and let's say there is like a new EU novel. The greatest threat is not that it's going to have SJW politics. It's not that it's going to be bad. The greatest threat is that someone doesn't put it in the proper kind of chronological context, right? You know what I mean? You're going to do something big.
Or even the greatest threat is just that they don't care about continuity, and they just go, here, write a book, and then slap a Legends label on it.
Right. So, but who knows? Maybe that'll never happen. But again, I still
go towards my thought. Sorry to interrupt, but still go towards my thought of going, I'd rather have them have a go and it not turn out right than have no chance of it being good.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's right. I mean, at this point, there's nothing that can. Yeah, I mean, what's the risk? What's the risk, right? Again, someone says, well, what if it's like a bad book? Let's be honest. There are already bad EU books. What I want the most is to know sort of what happens next. So I care about the story, even if the quality of the product is a little off. At least I mean, look, let's just be totally blunt. Like, episode 1 is not a great film, but I'm glad I know more about what happens in that part in this timeline.
Yeah. Again, and when you read the novels around it and you get to see things on the big screen, you go, oh yeah, this is cool. You appreciate those moments.
Yeah. By the way, I'm gonna get attacked for my views on episode 1, so I should clarify that. Funnily enough, it's actually the prequel that I rewatched the most. So go figure. So.
There you go. You want to get that Jar Jar in you.
I will admit, like, I remember my initial reaction, right? Because I saw it opening day, and I remember thinking when I left, two things. I thought, I kind of felt like, like I want more. Like, it didn't really advance much in my view, right? And then again, that's all the first of a 6-part thing needs to do, is just get you back for episode 2. So, but the other thing I remember thinking was, I don't mind Jar Jar. I'll buy the action figure, but I have no idea what he said anytime he spoke. No idea. Or, I mean, so...
Use anyway. Thinking you're greater than the Gungans?
And then, like, Boss Nass, too, like, same thing. None of the Gungans made any sense. I couldn't understand anything.
Yeah, I mean, I was always all right with it, but I think it's the thing of how well you understand different accents and stuff as well. Because it was one of the things is like, Some Americans have trouble understanding the Aussie accent, but then Aussies will go, we understand all sorts of different English accents.
Right.
So it might be a similar sort of thing to that.
Sure, particularly when you see the movie theater too, all the sound effects, the noise and stuff. It was kind of I was just like, please, when Jar Jar talks, can we just have silence so I can really see the lips move and try and read, But but there's elements of that film though that I really adore. I mean, I think the soundtrack's brilliant. It's visually interesting to look at, and I appreciate how kind of just out there it is in some ways. And it's, to me, I think what I haven't seen the new stuff, but what to me must fundamentally sort of distinguish the new from even the worst of the prequels is that the old stuff just fundamentally has the Lucas feel. It's just it's this man's vision, and I love it, and I love it for what it is. And so it's just it's neat and different, bizarre.
And I think
great.
When I was rewatching it one time as well, I wasn't thinking about how different the prequel trilogy is, but at the same time keeping the core, as you say, Lucasfilm, but the core feel of Star Wars to it and the core through line of the story.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because he brought something, he put a whole heap of completely new things into it.
Yeah.
While also feeling still like Star Wars, even though you go, well, some things might have been better with better execution. But
still, it really did. It's that kind of that certain, that unknown kind of thing that just makes it what it is. It just feels like a Star Wars show, and it's interestingly, the Revenge of the Sith is maybe my least favorite of the 6. But not because I think it's bad, but because when I look back, I realize I've hardly ever rewatched it. I don't know why. I don't know why, but it could just be that.
Like time for a rewatch.
Yeah, I think so. It's in my mind. It's funny. It always, whenever I think back on it, I just think, well, it's very dark, just even visually, and I just feel like it kind of sets a mood, and I think you need to be ready to be kind of depressed and stuff. But also, there's something about it that just feels so inevitable. I kind of feel like, well, I don't know. I don't see much. I don't learn more about it and my feelings on Star Wars when I rewatch it in a way that, like, every time I see Attack of the Clones, I'm trying to make sense of the complexity. Every time I watch Phantom Menace, I'm enjoying it sort of just visually and in all the senses, the soundtrack and stuff. Revenge of the Sith, something about it's different. I just don't know why yet.
Yeah, I can definitely see that in a way. That definitely the part where you go, well, if I'm not in that great a mood, it won't help be entertainment that I just feel like watching and laying back and going, yeah, that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Then again, I mean, the sort of the opera scene with the Plagueis reveal. I mean, I could just watch that on a loop for 2 hours, and that would be a good version of episode 3. But
pretty sure you would have put a 10-hour version up sometime.
That would be great. But I love lots of the different scenes in Revenge of the Sith, and I actually end up rewatching a lot of those just on YouTube and stuff. But something about it, I just very rarely decide to sit down and watch the whole thing. Interestingly, too, like Empire, I don't enjoy rewatching more. I don't know why.
There's the Tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise 10 hours on YouTube.
Oh, that's perfect.
Perfect. Good fun. Yeah. What else are we going to talk about?
What else is to talk about? I'm trying to think if I've.
Trying to think of stuff we've mentioned before.
Yeah, what do we talk about? I'm trying to remember. You and I, we've had a couple conversations, and I've thought, hey, that would be great fodder for a video. But I'm trying to remember. You said something. Remember, you said something about Alita, and I still can't remember what my thought was. This was going back, and you were making some comment about the Alita, continue the Alita fandom or something.
Oh yeah, that's right. They had the thing about I tweeted it because I noticed just how many people the Alita army got to sign the petition for getting an Alita sequel, compared to how many people I've seen signing petitions for EU continuation.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I'll tell you, I'm just not a petition guy. I've never believed in it. And I'll tell you why. One reason in particular, there was a guy years ago who, I won't name names, but he was someone who he has a massive series of YouTube or of Facebook groups. Years before the decanonization, he started one called something like "Give Us Battlefront 3." This was like the EU version of Battlefront 3, and it just immediately got hundreds of thousands of views. And then when the decanonization occurred, the reboot, he changed the name to, and I won't say it because I'm not trying to call anyone out. He changed it to sort of like a Star Wars group of his general appeal, and then kind of became a bit of an anti-EU troll, and used this huge base that he built up out of people's love of EU content to then kind of go after the EU. It was a horrible thing. Anyway, the reason I say this is because he started reaching out to people early on in 2014, the Alliance, me, and he'd say, hey, here's what you guys need to do. You need, all the while critiquing us, right? He'd say, you need to start a petition, and then it'll be hugely successful. You'll get all these people to sign. Then you can show Lucasfilm and the press how big you guys are. But I found out that his goal was to make sure it tanked so that he could then say, hey, see, you guys, you only got 27 signups, right? And so every time I see someone send one around, I just go, this is not going to look well, because every time it doesn't do what the people think it's going to do. He's been out there to find it and to say, see, you guys are still losers. So I just think that type of thing, you got to be kind of careful about. You just be a little strategic, think of the optics, right?
I think it's still just a reflection on the fandom itself between Alita and the EU, that they were able to get so many people together to be able to go towards that, compared to like that tanking. Because if we had enough people in other EU groups and stuff, might have done better. Yeah. We don't know.
It is interesting. You do wonder. I mean, again, I've got my own eccentric views and history about these things, but you do wonder why few people want to sign up for those things, because it's like they went through the trouble of clicking like on a Facebook page. Why not just click a couple of extra keys, put their name, and then it's done? It is sort of surprising. The only thing I do think, though, is that there's something different about the EU compared to almost any other one of these kind of like continue some story franchise kind of movement. It's because
Alita got a lot of pull because it's a movie. I
think there's part of that. I think that, but I also think that, Alita is just Alita, right? So if there's no new movie, there's no new Alita, right? Whereas with the EU, again, I go back to something I said before that I genuinely believe. I think most Star Wars fans are also EU fans to some degree or another. And so I think that, unfortunately, again, we're a fandom inside of a fandom, right? And I think that consequently there's always a sort of strange pressure release valve. I think there are fans who love both canons, but who are like, well, I'm still getting new films. So I just feel like, frankly, it's like we face kind of an extra sociological hurdle where it's like, there are millions of EU fans. It's just that they don't identify primarily as EU movementeers, right? You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of the issue. And so,
call it that,
yeah, whatever you want to call it, right? But there, and it's interesting. Like, there are tons of people who are out there enjoying the EU who don't like identify with, oh, we need to get more EU. As far as they're concerned, they're like, oh my gosh, there's like hundreds of books still I need to get caught. I guess my point is, it's like, I just think we're a fandom in a fandom, and I just think that creates some confusion about what we.
And there's even division within this fandom, within the fandom, that even started from when the decanonization started.
Sure.
Stuff, so that hasn't helped at all.
It just exactly, and I mean, I feel like it's like I mentioned the show Jericho. Again, when it went off the air, it was very clear what we needed to do. We needed to get the show back on the air. But the EU, it's like, you see, even within friendly debates within our own groups these days, it's like people
using the word friendly loosely.
But it's like even when you have creative conversations about, well, what would we want to see next? Well, no one can agree. Again, 108 came out, and there were people who were like, oh, I don't want this. So there's all this disagreement. So I think that like there's and this is just true from social science. There is something almost inevitable about the sociological doom of any movement, right? Or again, I use that term sort of loosely. It's like, these fandoms come together and there's a part of it that wants to ask for something, right? But then it doesn't take very long for not even just personal fights, but just strategic fights, tactical fights, fights over objectives and things like that. And so I think it's on the one hand, it's a shame, but yeah, like something like Alita gathers all this, or even like release the Snyder Cut. Like, how the hell did that become more important than the EU? But it's just clear there's just that one goal, and I feel like we've pretty quickly in the EU fandom, we're just all over the place. The second someone says continue the EU, then someone goes, well, no, continue SWTOR. No, continue Force Unleashed. No, continue.
Even like you said, the goal for 5 years was to wait.
Yeah.
And that's not really a clear goal that everyone can actively pursue.
Yep. You're totally right. And it's actually sad because I feel like there were a lot of people who left. They left too early because they just couldn't last the 5 years. And they said, well, I give up. We're not going to get anything right. Then there were people who said, well, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to ask for this for 5 years. I'm going to ask for that for 5 years. And then there were people who said, well, for 5 years, I'm going to battle my fellow fans. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
And meanwhile, 5-6 years have passed. And how many of those folks have actually taken any time to just enjoy the books? I have to say this, and again, I don't want this to come across as a dig, right? But it's like, I want to be super clear about this. If all you've done is played like 1 minute of episode 1 Racer in an arcade in 1999 and you liked it, then you're an EU fan, right? So, there's a wide range but if after 6 years you still have not read Heir to the Empire or something, then you need to put the keyboard down and stop telling other fans what to do and get to work, right? And again, I know that
here's the time you won't be typing out messages to someone to read a book and be more productive.
Yeah, and again, it's like I only say that because it's like, not because I'm telling people what to do, but because I just think the only reason any of us are doing this is because we share a fellow love of the EU. So if you're not spending time loving the EU, you're going to make yourself miserable if you're spending all this time focused on, let's get this petition started, let's get this group in order. It's just like, no, it's like, just enjoy the content. You know what I mean? Like, after 6 years, there's enough time to expand beyond the one thing about it that got you in the first place.
I'm 2/3 through my chronological read through from 2016 of the novels.
That's great.
And I'm working through my comics. I started with all the old Marvel stuff because then I was like, okay, then I'll do Dark Horse because that'll be a bit more consistent.
Yeah, nice.
It's hard getting through the Droids and Ewoks comics because they're so kiddie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That happens. It's good.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think it's a thing, mentioned it in my anniversary video for the 6 years, was saying just like, there's people I know I've heard of and seen, people have only played like 1 or 2 of the games and go in EU groups, and then all they have to do is start arguments because they don't know the content.
Yeah.
Which is another part of it as well that doesn't help. Especially when it comes to Lucasfilm looking at the groups going, well, these people want more EU, but they're going to complain about everything we get.
You do, yeah. There is some element of that. I mean, I again, for all of the personal experiences I've had with some of the story group folks gaslighting me on Twitter and stuff, and again, for all of the fake outrage about, we got to be positive, otherwise they're not going to give us stuff. Yeah, you got to think that on the margin, I'm sure Pablo Hidalgo wakes up in the morning and goes, oh, wow, I've got 13 more death threats today. Well, I'm not going to go out of my way to convince Kathleen Kennedy to continue the EU. You know what I mean? It's all things equal. So
it's like R.A. Salvatore with Vector Prime when I don't want to write any more of these types of books because they'll just cause me to get death threats.
Yeah. It's fans get pretty passionate. It's really unfortunate, but I don't think by any means those people speak for the for the entire fandom, you know. But
no.
From what I've gathered, you know, you can kind of see this on like the new canon side. Again, these really bizarre, insular kind of toxic factions like on Twitter and stuff like the. Again, I'm just gleaming this from what I see in my feeds. You know, the people who like wanted Kylo Ren and Rey to like get married or something. You know, like there are all these people who now are mad that it didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, right. So it's, you know, there's just weirdos in every fandom, you know, but
yeah, all that stuff.
What else do we got? But yeah, 6 years. It's really crazy. It's really flown by.
It's sort of become normal now. That's what I was noting in my video. Just like it's become normal that it's decanonized, and I'm just reading through it.
It's become normal, and in some ways, maybe that's a healthy thing. I feel like, again, just thinking of the sociology of the elements of the fandom that I've been associated with for the last 6 years, it feels like, you know, there was a very brief white hot period of anger and confusion, and then that turned to strategy and led to billboards and led to groups and led to the Twin Suns Foundation and various things like that, and then led to, you know, taking sort of the message to people where they are, going to Celebration, spreading the word, right? Just getting people to appreciate the content, defending it from haters and stuff, but then just learning to love it again. And I feel like we might finally be in the position 6 years on where now that it's just normal, we can just get back to loving it, because I feel like the amount of hate is decreasing. I feel like, and to be totally blunt, you know, Lucasfilm keeps putting up walls around, you know, the idea that they'll continue it. So it's like, honestly, like the energy I have for trying to convince them is decreasing. But again, it hasn't decreased my love of the content. So now that it's normal, it's like, great, we can just be normal fans again, which is, by the way, all I want. I don't want to keep this up. I just want to keep reading New EU, which I just hope comes, you know, but maybe normal's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it shows a good mental state when you go, okay, I've moved past it, I can accept the decision was made and this is what we have now, rather than always clinging on and living in the past.
Yeah, sure. And that's why I never understood the argument that was advanced by a minority in the beginning, which was like, hey, no, get rid of the new canon. Let's bring back the old. And it's like, that's so ridiculous and unrealistic. Again, my argument from day one was, oh, cool, you want to do this? That's fine. Just keep the old stuff going and I'll be happy. So.
Yeah, for sure.
It is a shame. I feel like, I guess one regret I have about just sort of what's happened the last couple of years is that, and this, by the way, this is going to come across a little bit like, you know how it is, like if you discovered a band when they weren't famous and then they get famous, then you feel like, well, I knew them before these, you know, before these normies. There's a weird thing that's happened, you know, post Last Jedi, where I felt like all of the gains that the EU fandom had made in terms of convincing others in the fandom that there was a coherent strategy to let the new stuff continue, but just give us more of the old, right? So we were really laying the groundwork to convince the fandom and ultimately Lucasfilm that there really is an idea of two canons, and you just need to keep the old one going as well in parallel. That took a lot of work, right? It took a lot of time, a lot of patience. It took a lot
I remember reading about that when I saw that the efforts were being made to clear up all of the misinterpretations of the original billboard and everything.
Yeah, that's right. And what people don't appreciate is that, you know, again, like it took a little bit of a rhetorical effort to convince even the EU fandom that no, this is what we mean when we say twin suns. This is what we mean when we say continue the old, right? It's not to overthrow the new, et cetera, et cetera. We really had to kind of like create the vocabulary to talk about this to convince Lucasfilm and the licensees, so that when Marvel does something like 108, we're able now to say, oh yeah, that's Legends canon. I mean, that took some work, right? And unfortunately, a lot of those gains, everything we've done has kind of been overwhelmed by, like on Twitter, where it's like, again, something like that now gets the attention. And again, not to sound like, like the old guy, get off my lawn, but it's kind of like, well, damn, like we were here. And to the extent that people are worried about the EU fandom, like, making Lucasfilm angry, it's like, well, shit, don't associate us with the people whose like goal are to be trolls, right?
The way they come across from a lot of the methodology that I've seen.
Kind of the tactic, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the tactic. Like, and again, part of it's just, that's just what social media and Twitter and stuff sort of forces you to do, and I get that. But it's so funny. It's like, so there really was a weird period where it's like, there's that little part of me that's kind of like, oh, darn, just when we actually were kind of like making some of these real gains, it was just kind of like, shoot, like somehow, in a weird way, we got completely overwhelmed by this much bigger online force. And again, like I asked him, I was kind of like, how does Release the Snyder Cut become so big? It turns out there's something about whatever it is that group of people are doing that apparently is just a lot better at the EU fandom at promoting itself. And so there's like this weird twinge of regret where it's like, geez, like I would never have adopted their tactics, but like somehow they're getting attention. I think they're getting the wrong attention from Lucasfilm. They're not endearing themselves in any way, right? But then again, it's like, it's weird. It's so, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like, it's odd when I look back on the history. In a funny way, that's another reason why I'm glad that things feel normal now. I'm glad that, because the post Last Jedi hatred that emerged from a lot of folks who weren't even part of the EU fandom, I think it felt very much like what the EU fandom felt like for a couple of months in 2014 that we sort of got over. But I feel like now, with kind of the rise of social media, it's become kind of systematized. Now these people have built brands around, well, this is the tactics I'm going to employ and stuff like that. And it's just kind of weird. At the end of the day, it was just kind of like, it was like, oh no, like, gosh, like learn from where we were. Like take the hate and turn it into something, celebratory.
The whole journey for me, like especially post Last Jedi, was when I was going through the thing, definitely of going, hang on, the way that I've been acting online after these last two movies isn't right, and I don't want to come across that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to police tactics or anything, but again, I look back and I just go, oh, it's a shame, and I feel like some of that whooped a lot of EU fans up too, even, right? And again, it was kind of like fun to be all zingy and everything online and stuff, but it was just kind of like, all it did, I think, was kind of, again, take the game.
That's what we're gonna heal for all of the hatred and that, and then they just went, oh, let's scratch the scab off.
Exactly. And at a point where we should have been moving kind of into our let's celebrate phase, right? Let's celebrate as well as continually remind them that we want more. All of a sudden, it's kind of like, nope, we got overwhelmed by, nope, let's be zingy and zany again. It's interesting to look back on the last 6 years, all these different stages. And I do sense, by the way, that even to the extent that I can kind of glean from Twitter feeds and stuff, has moved a little bit away from Star Wars, because not many people really are. I think people are just so ready to move past the sequel trilogy that even they aren't dwelling on it. But I sort of feel like, again, it's another reminder that we had to wait 5-6 years as a fandom. I feel like we need to wait a couple of years more before the Phantom Menace stuff kind of goes off. When Captain Marvel 2 comes out, they'll go crazy against that. And in some sense, that provides us the opportunity again to kind of recapture a little bit more of the EU kind of space online. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
I'm just checking something quickly, just out of interest, thinking of that. Looking at the views for Expanded Universe Book Club that I've been doing. I know we started it with a couple of people that were in the fandom, and that's one of them still is. But it seems like, and the views are fairly consistent, they haven't seemed to grow a lot. But the whole EU love side of it is okay, and people watch the streams mainly because of their other content anyway, I think. But the whole thing of like moving past it is like, a lot of the people would have moved away and gone, okay, we're saying because we like the people, we like the discussion, but what else? I've seen a lot of the topics, like a lot of them started off with Last Jedi hate, and then they've gone on to other things. I've noticed that trend as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and a lot of this has emerged then. I mean, but I think it's great if anyone gets turned on to the EU, which is again like my only goal, right? You know, and so that's what it's kind of all been about. And that's the thing. It's like it was never about trying to critique politics or dump on Lucasfilm or whatever, you know. And it's like my only beef with Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy is that they don't give us more of the EU, and that's it. And so to the extent that like any of these like kind of, you know, angry online sort of debates have like, if they've convinced anyone to read more EU, that's great, because it's all about just sharing the love of the content. But it's interesting, again, it's very, very muddy waters.
Well, we're talking about some of the things with the fandom, and that's a huge part of like they've definitely influenced the reaction from Lucasfilm and how they view people that are Star Wars fans.
I think that's right. And it's interesting. It'd be interesting to sort of sift through in a couple of years, like, did that have an effect on the EU fandom too? Were there some EU fans who then decided, oh, actually, I want to make a broader critique of everything happening in pop culture or what? And so again, I by the way, it's funny, you know, I'm glad we're able to connect. We've been trying to do this for months. I'm like semi-retired now. I'm like semi-retired from just like doing anything online EU, because it's like, I kind of crave the normality of just going back and just being a lone fan, just to kind of celebrate it, right? And just because it's just, we'll see in a couple of years where things are at. But again, it's like we were making a lot of important rhetorical gains that I felt just kind of got swept a little bit away, and I think we need to spend some time kind of rebuilding a little bit of that, you know. And I think a lot of us individually just figuring out what do we want to do. And I think you and I are both on the same page of like, let's just talk more about the books, you know, which is what we all wanted to do.
Talk more about it, share our love for it. That's the main thing, because I've been through the hate cycle earlier, and it's just okay. But what do I actually want to bring to the world? What do I actually want to promote with my channel and what do online? And it's going, well, I don't want to be the person to be bringing hate to everyone. And I'll definitely be going, we want more EU the whole time.
Yeah.
Jeff was saying about how it's really not good about, it's not really going to work to try and unite the fandom anyway. So I was talking to everyone going, it'd be about the same time, it'd be good to try and do a video and trying to unite people and whatever. But then we thought about it and we kept trying to think about what we'd say, and it's just like, none of this will actually work.
Yeah. Right. No, I think that's right. I mean, it's just a shame. And again, like, and the other problem you face, right, is like, the most this could ever do is unite the people who are on the particular social media platforms.
If I do a video, the people that follow me are already united because they follow me.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right. And the thing too is like, it's funny how there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us who we're outsiders to all this. In other words, we're not Lucasfilm employees. We're not authors and stuff. The interesting thing is, again, all of the battle over how to make the fandom better in order to get more EU, come to find out that among the people who aren't on social media part of these battles are the people like Joe Bongiorno, who are the actual insiders, who know a hell of a lot more about what's going on and who know enough to tell us that, don't worry, you guys have such goodwill inside Lucasfilm among the minority of people there who want to see this happen that just wait it out, right? And so actually that's what still gives me a little bit of hope. All of our thinking about how can we good faith make things better, it turns out that Troy Denning, Kevin J. Anderson, Michael Stackpole, Matthew Stover, you know, these people want more EU. So we've already won, right? There's nothing more to perfect in some ways, right? So that's the good news.
Timothy's done to write more EU if he wanted to. If you said...
Totally. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's totally.
They had James Lucino, and they've hardly used him.
Yeah, that's really weird. And I think the only reason he did Catalyst was because of he'd been working with them on a couple of other projects that got scrapped, and I think it was kind of they threw him a bone. But I think they're done with him. It's really weird, and I was starting to talk about this earlier, but I don't know what happened at Del Rey. that they just decided to completely alienate all of their, forget the fans, they alienated their authors. And I mean, like a guy like Troy Denning was like, he would do anything for them, you know, and it's just weird. And even some of the folks who, like Christy Golden, you know, like they tried to incorporate her, but they're done with her now, basically, you know, and it's sad.
I mean, it's
weird.
almost like they all tried to write decent stories that looked at the continuity, and then it didn't work out because it's just a mess.
Yeah, but it's weird, like they're not getting asked to come back, which is the odder thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even just publish one AU novel, see how well it sells, and as if you're a smart business person, you'll go, if it sells well, we'll make more.
Yeah, I know. That's the weird thing. It turns out that, like, you know, for years it was always a joke that Lucasfilm just wanted all of our money, right? George just kept our money. Right now they don't. And actually, there's an interesting thing happening in Star Trek books right now, where unfortunately Star Trek fans are kind of where EU fans are. I did a video about this a while ago, where the continuity has ended, unfortunately, because of the new TV shows. They've decided to end the continuity, so we're very much in a 2014 situation. However, Alan Dean Foster, actually, when the JJ Trek movies came out in 2009, part of that licensing deal was like to create some original content, books and comics. Alan Dean Foster actually wrote a book with those new characters, but it never got released. But guess what? It just came out last week, after 10 years. Because Paramount said, well, we like money, and we've got this in the can, let's just put it out there. So I'm really glad to see that, and I hope other people, I mean, because again, that's what a great opportunity for like Lucasfilm to say, hey, Clone Wars is popular again. Del Rey, why didn't you go release Escape from Dagu? You know?
Because I'd have it.
Yep. Although, you know, by the way, the exciting thing is that
the only thing I wasn't sure of with Joe releasing the stuff was when he was writing Supernatural Encounters and going, if you pay this much, I'll put an anagram of your name in there.
Oh, well, it's funny you say that, because I took total advantage of that. So my first daughter is going to be in there as an anagram. But
I just wasn't sure about, should I put it in my timeline or just stay to the officially published stuff or what?
Yeah, well, no, I know exactly what you mean, right? I mean, there's a part of me that goes, hey, great. There's kind of this like fanon kind of headcanon way in which now my daughter is part of the EU, right? But no, I know what you mean. I sort of feel like, and you get into an interesting territory here where I think at some point, if you sit back and say facts are facts, and you look at how poorly Lucasfilm has treated the EU fandom by gaslighting us about the success of 108 and stuff, there comes a point where you have to conclude, I'm not saying we're there yet, but there might be sooner than later, where you have to conclude, okay, they have now so completely let go of this IP with both hands that they're A, never going to continue it, and that B, it really does fall on us, right? So that there's a sense in which a guy like Joe maybe is actually the closest thing we have to, say, something like an official story group who can continue. And yes, it's fan fiction, but what else could it be at this point? Because Lucasfilm has basically written it off forever.
2014 as well, being like, well, let's continue it through fan fiction. So that's been interesting. And going, well, I didn't really want to support that because, I mean, it's not the official story.
Right. It's right, but you know, you get into some interesting kind of more philosophical questions over, well, what does it mean for something to be a canon, right? Well, up until 2014, it was pretty simple. It's whatever Lucasfilm declared it to be, right? But again, if post 2014 they've proven time and again how little they care about it, then they let go of it, and that therefore they're no longer the arbiters of what's canon, right? Now, again, that's very tricky and very dangerous, because then there's going to be debates about who is in position to decide it.
That's the uniting the fandom thing again. We're going, well, we need to unite enough people to agree on the direction of the continuity.
Sure, yeah, that's right. And I think the most interesting wrinkle in all of this is what Lucas himself said, right, years ago, which was that there, remember the 3 pillars interview, right? for him, fan fiction it's the lowest tier, but it's on that tier. And again, does that make it easy? No. But again, I think at some point, if folks are genuinely hungry, as am I, as are you, right, for more EU.
And at the moment, to be honest, I'm reading all the stuff that I haven't read yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, no, that's the great thing.
It'll be when I reach the end of that I go, damn, I want more.
Totally. And it might be years from now, right? But at some point, that time will come. And I think the good thing is you could do a lot worse than having a Joe Bongiorno write something or convincing, like Ryder Wyndham to put out, yes, it would be fan fiction. But again, it's kind of like, well, sheesh, like these are things that, old EU authors would have probably written in the canon. So, but again, I think like 50 years from now, whatever was written as fan fiction would be harder and harder. But, it's amazing, right? Like, there's like an official continuing continuity of like Wizard of Oz stories. Like there's a group of people who determine what the canon, the ongoing continuity are, and they're there. And sure, anyone is free to write a fan fiction piece about it, but there's a group of people who have decided, of all the things, these are the things that we think tell the story. And I feel like, yeah, there's been a plan B like that for years since 2014, and we're probably getting closer and closer wanting to consider it. But, in the meantime, yeah, something like Supernatural Encounters by Joe, I'm going to say, yes, it has an asterisk by it, but again, it's about the closest thing we'll see. And again, like I mean, listen,
yeah, I've been holding off reading it because I've been going, well, I need to read all the other stuff first. But yeah.
Sure.
But then I'll see. Okay, then I'll go to some of this other stuff and go, okay, how well does it really line up once I've read everything in that? Which I'm sure he's done a great job.
Oh, he's impeccable, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, again, another irony, right? Like, it turns out we don't need Lucasfilm anymore to guide us. Because a guy like Joe has got almost a greater incentive than they do to keep it in check, I mean, again, you look at Lee Lin-Chi, it's like we said at the start, it's just like, it turns out that fans have evidently cared more about those little retcons that he allowed, right? Even if he found ways later of asking the author to make sense of it, it turns out that for all these years, it was the fandom that was really one of the essential pillars holding up continuity, right?
That's why I think you're at the point, especially this far after Souls has been out. It's been 37 years of EU. You go, let's hire some of the fans to actually do that sort of thing if you're at Lucasfilm.
I always said this, right? And we talked about it last time we did a video, but I said there's three pillars of Star Wars or the EU that kept it all together. There was Lucasfilm, there was the fandom, and there were the authors, right? And at this point, the current post, sort of 2014 Lucasfilm, right? Post sort of 2014 Star Wars. Well, the fandom is alienated from Lucasfilm. The authors aren't asked back anymore. So it turns out now that there's now 2/3 are alienated from what Star Wars used to be. But all that means is now but we can unite those things, right? So it turns out now there's more of us than there are of the last pillar. So it turns out maybe we're actually in a stronger position in some sense to sort of provide that kind of, imprimatur on what a continuing continuity would be.
That story group.
Yeah.
And hire Drew Karpyshyn. Or just ask if he wanted to write it as a fan fiction.
Yeah. And think about this, like even if all like an official group, a quasi-official group that like it comes together as a story group, right? Again, you can imagine a Joe Bongiorno and Ryder Wyndham, right? A Troy Denny. Even if all that group said, "Hey, Drew, what would you have done?" Then the idea itself then kind of helps add to the lore, right? So,
but even like the Jason Lewis with the Dark Forces remaster project, he's doing that in his spare time, and he's an official game developer and everything. So even people that would officially be paid for their jobs if they have enough love for it and time, possibly be given the incentive to be able to actually write more.
Yeah, totally. And there's a ton of stuff that was in production when 2014 happened that kind of disappeared that still exists in files on people's computers. So there's lots of people who are in position to at the minimum tell us what they were planning to do. Like this guy Mike Fessler I met, he was in the process of working with James Luceno a reference guide just about the Grand Army of the Republic. That was going to get produced. It disappeared, but now he's got the files, and so it's not official, EU canon, except it would have been, and now he's got that to tell us. And so what sorts of innovations he was going to make, he can contribute to this, right? So there's tons of stuff out there like that we could do. So again, I just feel like I'm not actually making the argument that we need to incorporate fan fiction yet, but I do think it's worth every fan sitting back and assessing, given the lack of regard that Lucasfilm has for continuing the EU at this point, at what point do we just say they're done for good? The lack of regard they have for that old storyline speaks volumes.
And then past that, going, do I actually want to try and continue this as fan fiction and put it in an actual world, or do I just want to leave it and enjoy what we have?
Right. I really appreciated something that Pablo Hidalgo said years ago in 2006, which he said is if the EU ever was rebooted, that there would actually be there would be one potential benefit, which is that at least it would be just this nice, unalterable, kind of almost like trapped in amber that you could, and that actually, there's something about that you kind of could appreciate, because in some sense it's like, great, then I know the total scale and scope, I can read it all, and then I can feel like I've gotten to the end of it, right? But the way they rebooted left it open, right? That again, there was no transition. I feel like
it's trapped in amber, but then there's parts that have broken off of it.
That's right. And that's where I think they goofed really badly. And I think they kind of created this monster, right, in the form of the EU fandom that's demanding more legends, because it's like, again, it's I don't
just transitioned and said these are the final lot of stories for the EU, and they just wrapped up those last things.
That's right.
It would have been a lot.
Seriously, I mean, no one seriously is asking for like yet another story set in the Rebellion era or something, right? All we want can finish close the gaps, right? And it's very telling, Troy Denning has been very clear about this. He did not know that Crucible was the last book. He had no idea. And he has admitted that if he had known, he would have added something else to the end that would have kind of helped wrap it up, right? And it's just so crazy. God, they I feel like every time I talk to someone about the EU, it inevitably comes back to how bad the reboot was announced, but boy, was it ham-fisted.
Yeah.
Man, did they make a mistake, We would not be sitting here today having this conversation if 6 years ago they would have done something like this. If that message had said, here's where we wanted to go, but we got a better vision, folks, so we're so sorry, and we're transitioning this way, and there's going to be 3 more comic books, and it's going to tell the story or something, I would have been like, okay, that sucks, but I get it. But they didn't do that. And I have not stopped fighting ever since, And
the other good thing that came from it is meeting people like you and Matt and that. Because
I totally.
If it didn't, I don't know if I wouldn't be where I am today, really, because of course my channel style is EU, and I wouldn't have had a reason to worry about it too much. I would have just been my EU groups and everything.
It's funny. I totally agree. I mean, I do think that it turns out that there's some things we can thank Disney for, or New Lucasfilm, whoever it was that made the decision. I think that's totally right.
The good that's come out of the bad times, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. For all this talk about, I don't like the word community, like EU community, because again, I think in that term, it takes on other meaning and stuff. But I feel like, we're a fandom, and there's a movement that grew out of the fandom. And I think you can build little communities like on pages and stuff. But I will say there is that sense of fellow feeling and community that they kind of have helped engender in a lot of different places. I mean, it's so funny. I've met so many people who I now consider good friends through like the EU fandom post 2014, who it turns out like we were at the same Star Wars events years ago, but only now virtually have we met, right? But I mean, like I met tons of people who were like, oh, they're like, yeah, like I was at Celebration 5, and I was like, darn, I was too. If only we had known, we could have actually hung out, right? So it took this happening for us to kind of finally connect virtually,
Yeah, definitely. It's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, what a 6 years. Again, it really flew by, and it'll be interesting to sort of see where the next 6 years go. I think one challenge is that EU fans, we don't have a similar sort of there's no episode 12, right, that we need to then get to, right, and get past, right? So I I worry a little bit about people losing some of their spirit in this, right? People are going to fall off, I think, in some ways, because it's like it's not clear what the next goal is. But
yeah, I mean, amongst everyone being divided, it isn't too clear anyway, because everyone has their own version of what they want.
That's true. And the only silver lining, and as I've maintained for many years now, it is virtually inevitable that the new canon timeline is itself rebooted. And so I think our greatest hope is that we need to hang on long enough for that to happen, to see what
into a mess of continuity in the way.
Yeah. Well, and they've some of the strategists there, some of the communications folks there have been very smart about reframing about how little they care about that now. They're claiming that that's not the goal anyway. So, but at some point, there's going to be a new director and a new movie or a new TV show or a new comic book line or whatever. And it's going to get so messy that someone's going to say, I think it's time to reboot. So we kind of need to get to that point then, to sort of say, hey, here's an idea, you know?
But even then you go, well, is it worth bothering?
Well, you know,
is it worth staying in the groups and that?
Yeah, no, I know, right?
People, or do you just, when that happens and you see the news and you go, okay, now everyone come together?
Sure, I know, right? Then again, at some point, sometimes it takes something like that to remind, some exogenous shock to remind folks, oh yeah, let's come together over some particular sort of discrete goal. But
because who knows how long that'll be?
I know, who knows how long it'll be. And again, here's a hot take. Although I think that for years the EU was sort of held up by three elements: Lucas, the fans, and the authors. And while I think the authors and the fandom are a huge force, you've got some flashing lights back there.
Yeah, my light plays up sometimes. It's weird. It's like there's a ghost in my house.
It's the spirit of the EU coming. But here's my hot take. It's like, it could be very well the case that without Lucas as part of that kind of trinity, that Star Wars is sort of dead. That maybe Lucas is fundamentally, that again, any one of those three pillars is needed, and if one of them disappears, the whole thing falls down. And Lucas is a pretty big piece of it. And so again, like here's every once in a while I think to myself, why do I want more Legends if in some way Lucas doesn't have some tangential connection to it? Maybe for me, Star Wars is just done, and him retiring is the perfect out. I don't know. So that's something to consider. Because again, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be even that further removed. It's gonna take, because you don't have that ultimate Lucas check, right, on the storyline. So
being realistic, he's not going to come back to it.
No, exactly. And the most any of us would have hoped for, I think, pre-2014 is that, because we knew he wanted to retire someday. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be this soon, but I think we thought he would put one of his kids in charge or something like that, because Katie Lucas was starting to do some writing for the Clone Wars and stuff, or someone connected with Lucasfilm, Ron Howard or something, and you would sort of say, okay, there's a connection there, right? But then it just doesn't feel like Lucas himself really kind of has much of a connection to it anymore. And so again, you even look at something like 108 and you go, well, it works as well as it did in spite of some of these elements missing, right? But again, like 10 years from now, what would Marvel 109 look like? Someone might just be like, oh, here's what I think Star Wars is like, but it's been 20 years since the EU, so I don't know anymore,
Yeah, when you think back on it, Lucas was the first one to fall out, and then the other pillars crumbled.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, and again, it's to the licensee's credit. It's to Del Rey's credit, for instance, right? That for those several years after Lucas sold it off, that we were still getting great content. I mean, again, everyone complains about Disney buying Star Wars, but we got Plagueis, we got SWTOR, we got Kenobi, and the list goes on and on. Legacy Comics, the list goes on and on. And it's like it was all those forces keeping it together, right? But again, a little bit of the fandom is left, the authors aren't invited back, and now Lucas isn't there. very precarious, right? So
that's why I don't blame Disney as well, because we had a couple of years under them where good content was still being produced.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So that's when possibly from Bob Iger's book, he helped influence George into the decision he made. But apart from that, it's not Disney's fault about the content. It's more the management of Lucasfilm.
Totally. I mean, this idea that Disney really has anything to say about it is kind of silly. It's the individual content creators, right, and the story group in theory at Lucasfilm, who we've now discovered had virtually no control over the films. That's been revealed. That's not speculation, right? They didn't. So almost from the start, by design, there was no way in which to keep this coherent. So What are you gonna do? It's crazy.
Take over Lucasfilm.
I know. Everyone's like, gosh, I'm like, that might just have to be a strategy at some point. Some really rich dude puts together a concern that just buys it off. Jim Shooter, the editor at Marvel for decades, or for years, right? He was actually the one that brought the Star Wars license to Marvel in the 70s and stuff. Hugely successful editor-in-chief that really turned Marvel around. And but he was sort of a controversial figure, and he was kind of invited to leave or whatever. But he actually put together a play in the 80s to buy Marvel. So he'd been let go, but he came this close to actually owning Marvel. He just got outbid, right? So it's like, you in some weird alternate reality, you could imagine a version where there's like some super rich EU fan out there who says, no, like Disney's having a really hard time right now. They might want to jettison this IP. Yeah, I'll buy it for $2 billion.
I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing of me going, well, I'm studying film and TV.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was a bit of a pipe dream, but you never know.
I feel so bad for like what's his face who's doing The Mandalorian now? Who's the guy? Favreau, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's an interesting guy. He's a creative guy. I love what he did with Iron Man and kind of getting that kick-started and stuff. And you can kind of appreciate how he's someone who, he's an older guy. He's clearly a fan of the pre-2014 era. He's like us, right? But now he's working in this new canon space, and it's sad. There's a part of me that kind of wishes, like, gosh, like I would have loved to have seen what something like that would have been like in the EU, where
if he was doing the Star Wars Underworld show or something.
Yeah, it would have been amazing, right? And it's just sad now because it's like everything that a guy like that in very good faith does to work in some little Easter egg from the EU, I just go, dude, it's so sad. It's just totally falling on deaf ears. I just don't care. I don't care that this character's holding the gun from the holiday special. It's just like, dude, it's the new storyline. Just make up new stuff. You know what I mean? But I feel bad. It's like, it must be really difficult for some of these creators to get these phone calls. It's like, hey, do you want to work in Star Wars? And it's kind of like, well, I would have liked to have done, 2014 and, but.
Yeah, that's where also whoever ends up getting Lucasfilm next will have a hard time building back up the reputation.
Yeah. I just think what saddens me more than anything right now is that they're even, it just feels like the Star Wars brand just feels tarnished. It's sad. It just feels like, here was their chance to this new thing, and it just doesn't seem like it totally landed, even with the people that have stuck on with it. And it's sad. It's just really sad to see that Star Wars isn't just the primary. It was really sad when like Avengers Endgame, outsold, it like raised more money and revenue and stuff. It's just sad. It's like Star Wars should be like the top of the mountain, right? And it just doesn't seem to be there, and it's just really sad.
Yeah. And whenever I mention Star Wars in the conversation, now I have to always say Star Wars EU, and then if someone doesn't know, I'd explain what it is.
Yeah, right.
Because everyone thinks of the new stuff.
It's funny too. And it's interesting. You can even get into little disagreements with folks about that. Like I've seen, there's this question of, well, what period of time are we talking about, right? So a lot of folks, they go, 1977 to 2014 or something, right? And then I go, well, no, actually 1976 to 2014. But depending how you count the SWTOR expansions, and Marvel 108, now you need to say 2014, 2019, parentheses, every year for the expansions, right?
Yeah, we sort of, yeah. So I'll say to present because the stuff's still coming out.
Yes, true. Yeah, that's right.
We're still waiting for the next one. Will have to be the last expansion for SWTOR.
Probably, yeah.
And then that's done.
Yeah.
And then we'll see how things go from there. That's my last bit of new EU content that I'm holding out for.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And going, okay.
You never know. There's the one possibility is that we get a couple of years ago, like Abel Pena released Skywalkers, which was like a kind of a short story, and it's something he'd written pre-2014. What was interesting was it got released like quasi-officially. It wasn't produced as a book or something, but it was available, like the PDF or something was available online.
Yeah.
And so you never know. That might be the one thing. So we might get a couple more things like that, maybe someday, because every once in a while I've noticed StarWars.com, they'll kind of pay lip service to something from the old days. Oh, the Ewoks, weren't they fun? Here's this TV show,
And then people go, oh, what? A TV show? Oh, that cartoon looks bad. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. We'll just have to see wherever everything ends up. I don't know how long the contract is for SWTOR, but I think it's 2022. From what I've heard.
Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, it's getting closer and closer. And
so I'm thinking that hopefully at least the servers will be kept up.
Yeah. To some degree.
If they aren't officially, then I'm hoping it'll get the Galaxy's treatment with all the expansions and tags.
Yeah, right. The Galaxy's treatment, or even like there's still a huge underground fandom of the old card game, of the old Decipher card game, that are continuing to sort of produce new rules and to kind of keep that going. So there are these kind of neat underground ways of keeping it going, but. What's really sad too right now is that Fantasy Flight, who has the license at least for a while going forward, now they've just announced that they're going to stop producing new RPG content, which is really weird.
I think it's because they're not making money from it, because a lot of the fans that would have been playing the RPGs were EU fans, and fans of the new stuff.
I think there's something to that. I mean, I do know that Fantasy Flight. I know because they've started here where I am. They've started moving more into online RPG gaming, and so just in general, they wanted to experiment more with that, and I think that that's working. But and by the way, they've always had just like problems just being able to physically produce the content in time and get it shipped and stuff. But they've had some supply channel issues. But yeah, I one thing I noticed, like just for years of going in and out of game stores looking for like the latest EU content, is that all of a sudden when things started to kind of shift over, and what was that game that they put out? It was like the first new canon thing. It was like, was it Star Wars Destiny or something? Or all of a sudden it wasn't
game. Yeah.
There was one customizable card game that like had Rey on the cover, and then there was another one. It was like a whole series of things that like black boxes. I think it was called, I don't know, but all of a sudden it was like, it just, no one was ever buying it, right? And clearly it was like overhyped like everything else, and just didn't really kind of go anywhere. And to this day, it just doesn't seem like anyone's talking about it. And I also feel like in the same way that pre-2014, there were lots of different communities within the EU. Again, some folks who were just gamers, some folks who were just this and that. You're seeing that now with the new canon side, right? Where it might in theory be connected, but there's tons of normies who just want to go see a couple of movies every few years. They're not into gaming. They're not into card games and stuff. They're not buying Battlefront. And I think they're experiencing some of those challenges, and I think so Fantasy Flight may not be making any money, which is just really sad, because I thought they did a pretty good job at those old source books.
Honestly, I haven't played them, so I'm not sure. But I just haven't been in the right circles, I don't think, to play the RPGs and stuff. I have to get a hold of the source books.
You got to get well. I think there a number of it's available online. Just PDFs, and they've released stuff from time to time. But there's a growing movement of people in the EU fandom who want to do more online RPGing, right? Which could be a lot of fun. Like not doing online games, but actually just like holding events where you could do the RPG just virtually, which I think could be really cool to kind of let people in on what that process is like, because that's been such a huge part of keeping people's interest in Star Wars going. But I think it's pretty intimidating for people to know what it even means to play a role-playing game. What is that? What are they talking about? Understand.
And when you start hearing about the process, it starts to feel really complicated at the start, and so you have to get past it.
And again, this sounds like a totally elitist value judgment, and it's not. It's more of just a sociological sort of snapshot. But I've said this for years too. I think this is what fundamentally divides, just generationally. I think like EU fans from younger, newer fans of the new canon, which is that one of the things that EU fans my age had to do to get into Star Wars was to take the time and learn the rules and play West End games or what have you, right, or Wizards of the Coast, to do a lot of very intensive work, right, to really try and get into this stuff. And now, if you're a fan of the new canon, all you got to do is just sit back and buy Disney Plus and just press one button, and it does all the work for you, right? You just sit back and you watch The Mandalorian, 3 movies, or whatever they Rogue, and that's it. And you don't have to read the books and comics because they don't seem connected anyway. And it's like
don't tell any important parts of the story. It's the main thing I've heard.
Yeah, right. And so there's just something different, and I think that's true. I mean, that's true across pop culture. It's not a Star Wars thing, but it's again, same thing happened to Star Trek, right? Where it's like they ended the book continuity. Why? Well, because people are getting lazier and they just want to watch Star Trek Discovery, even though it's a horrible show, because it's easier. It takes time to read a book, and so something's changing, right? And so Doctor Who's another great example. It used to be every like quarter there'd be 3 new Doctor Who books going back to 2005, right? Not to mention everything from the pre-25 reboot. There's like 800 Doctor Who novels, literally, right?
Yeah. And look at how many there are. I'm like, okay.
Let me see. I've been doing some reorganizing. This is about a third of them. I collect Doctor Who and Star Trek books, but the reason I mention is because all of a sudden it slowed down. All of a sudden, with like the Last Doctor, there was like maybe 6 or 9 books, and now with the Doctor, there's been 3 main, and all of a sudden it's just like, why? Because it's just easier to just wait for this series to come around each year. It's changing.
More people online have been saying how they don't like the choices they're making with the story of the Doctor and that.
Well, that's true too. I mean, it could be that people just aren't as big of fans of it as well, right? But it's like, yeah, I'm very torn about that. I don't know. I sort of feel like I come to Doctor Who from kind of the same perspective I come to the EU, which is that it doesn't always make sense and it's not always good, but I just still want to know where the story's going. So for me, I don't kind of care if they want to do something bold and crazy, great, just see it through, just let me know what happens next. So.
Oh yeah, I haven't read the books that I watched, so I'm still trying to get through Classic Who. I keep getting caught up with other things, but that's all right.
Did you watch the most recent Doctor Who series then? And what did you think about the big reveal?
I thought the issue was that they tried to explain where the Time Lords came from. And the explanation that they would give, people would be upset about, I think.
Yeah. I think that's right. It did.
If they were going to explain it, I thought they might connect it more back to like when Matt Smith was the Doctor and Amy and Rory had the child, that they were actually humans that invented time travel, and then the babies, while they were traveling in time, would become Time Lords eventually, something like that.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
That's speculating, and I think it's good to leave the speculation there for some things.
I think so too. I think that's right. I think it takes a little bit of the mystery away, and it gives us something. It's funny. There's still enough mystery that they've given themselves enough room to kind of get out of this, or they could find other ways of making sense of this. But on the other hand, it's like it's too much specifics. Yeah, they've kind of locked things down. So yeah, I mean, it was a bold decision. I think the reveal of the Renegade Doctor in the middle of the series was great.
That was actually really cool. I was interested in, how's it going to connect in?
Yeah, I mean, that episode I thought was like, wow, I don't think I've seen a Doctor Who episode this good in years, right? But yeah, things got a little weird towards the end. But Doctor Who's tricky. It's funny. I remember thinking with Jodie Whittaker's first series, what was that, series 11, right? I thought it was really boring, right? I didn't dislike it. I just thought it was boring. And the thing that was so striking was that it didn't seem like time was a character anymore. Like there wasn't any sort of like kind of sci-fi kind of the way that like Stephen Moffat had really like used time almost as a character. And I also thought the weirder thing too was that we didn't get to know anything more about the Doctor. Well, this season remedied that entirely, and then I thought, oh my gosh, no, now you went too far, But
yeah, I think it was like probably play it safe because it's a new showrunner for the first series.
Yeah,
and then he goes, okay, I've got a bit of a handle on the story. Let's.
I still like the idea that kind of came out of the TV movie as well as some of the books that they were kind of hinting towards, like in the Virgin series, but like. Maybe like the Doctor was like himself half human or something, which would have been an intriguing place to go. But would explain why he liked
about the hybrid and all that.
The hybrid. That's right. And then there's a lot of weird things from the classic era. Like I don't know if you've gotten to like Logopolis, which is the last Fourth Doctor show, but like when Tom Baker.
It's been a while, but I've seen all of them up to where I'm at about 2/3 of the way through Tom Baker.
Okay, well, not to give much away, but like when he regenerates, like something very mysterious happens that like they've still never really sort of explained and stuff. But so we'll see what they do. We'll see what they do to make sense of all this. But anyway, yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, do you remember the episode Rosa from the 11th series about Rosa Parks? Yeah. And remember there's the weird baddie who like seems to know what a TARDIS is, and he's come from that prison. I have this theory that we're going to learn more about him because remember this series ends with her in prison. Maybe we're going to finally loop around to that. We'll see. Yeah,
that would be interesting. Like the Time Lords are supposedly destroyed again.
Yeah. Cool. Right.
And so we're back where we started with 9.
I'm kind of glad about that because I thought Hellbent was like when he finally finds Gallifrey, it was like the worst episode they've ever done.
That was weird because it's like, yeah, okay, let's do something to save the Time Lords, but we can't really have them in the series anymore because that would ruin things.
That's right. And then they brought Clara back again, who'd already died. And it was just like, so Hellbent just basically undid everything from.
Yeah, especially like, okay, are we just gonna have every companion cheated death like that?
Yeah. But I will say, just to connect to Star Wars, there is a fun Doctor Who novel called Forever Autumn. It's a 10th Doctor novel, and it mentions Jar Jar. And it actually suggests that Jar Jar is a real person in the Doctor Who universe who George Lucas was having dreams about, was somehow psychically connected to this alien. So in the Doctor Who book universe, Gungans are real. I thought that was kind of neat. So there's a lot of funny kind of crossovers like that. Yeah.
He's such a true Sith Lord that he created a bond with George Lucas.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I think I got to jump off. Looking at the time now.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah, not bad, right?
With you, even Doctor Who chats, but
I know, we should do more of that next time if we can ever make time.
Yeah. We might have to actually talk about content rather than just talking about fandom and how the decanonization was bad.
Exactly. Alrighty, I'm gonna jump off, but let's keep in touch. Talk to you soon, okay?
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Yeah.